Drop the beat.
I'm a never Trump guy. I'm a never Trump guy. I'm a never Trump guy. I never liked him. I'm a never Trump guy. 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 I'm a never Trump guy.
Hey, good morning. Hi, Kay. How are you? I'm looking for the original thing. Weirdly enough, I'm looking for the original Jesse Singal Serfs video. Lance has a short that makes him look like an idiot, but I'm looking for Jesse Singal's show. Does anybody know what the name of his show is and where it's primarily hosted? Where is Jesse Singal's show? Events by Jesse Singal or Blocked and Reported. The show is available wherever podcasts are found. He is also a writer. Is it Blocked and Reported? Is that where he was? Is Blocked and Reported posted to YouTube? Blocked and Reported. All public episodes, Blocked and Reported. Videos. And everything's from 2 years ago. What the hell? Good morning. Good morning, Justin. Good morning, Jonah. Good morning, Randy. It's posted to BarPod. I sent the link on X. Okay, cool. Thank you, Kay. One step ahead of me. All right. Uh-oh. Is it audio only? Uh-oh. Is it? I mean, we can still do it. I don't care because I'll just pull up a stupid picture of Jesse Singal and Lance, and we can just use our imagination to imagine them being smug. We can do that. Randy Chang says, "Oh God, Lance, the absolute worst." Listen, I've been nice to Lance in the past, but technically, I guess I don't need to. The reason why I've been nice is because he's never been rude or mean to me. And so it's hard for me to be like, ha, what a stupid idiot. I hope he gets cancer. Like, it's hard for me to do that when the other person has done nothing wrong to me. But yeah, Lance has to be one of the, I'm not even saying dumb to be mean. I'm saying like he has a low IQ. There's like 100 IQ, which is the average intelligence, and Lance is clearly 10, maybe 20 points below that because he actually cannot process information. And I think I've shared the story before, but Lauren Southern and I did the tag team debate against Lance and the Taylor Twin Rabbits, and that debate was so bad that I was hanging out with my buddy Silver. He drops by in chat sometimes under the name BiblioLife. And I was hanging out with my editor, Taze, aka Travis. And we were talking about the debate. And we were like, that was so bad, it's unwatchable. No one is going to watch this because it was so bad. But what ended up being so funny about it was so bad that it was such a train wreck that people could not look away. It was crazy. Dank Brandon says, good morning, Grill Hottest. Indeed, you have brought up the Grill Hottest prayer, which we should start saying. May your grill stay hot, your beer stay cold, and may you keep all your fingers while blowing things up. Amen. All right. Lance is a great meme, but God bless him. He keeps trying. Yeah. Audio only. Lance's video on Patreon. Oh, yeah? Should we become a patron? Oh, Miles Otwes says, Cotter, you're a damn liar. Proper rage bait. No. We're going to do it. We're going to do it for sure. As a matter of fact, I might become like a $2 patron of the Serfs just so we can get a video version of this. Let me go to my dashboard. Let me go ahead and process my payouts. That would be cool. Let me switch to, oh, and by the way, I do have a Patreon. It's not I don't really post anything there. I should, but I'm already so busy trying to do everything else that I just don't have as much time as I want. And so, it's just like it's like one more thing that I keep telling myself I'm gonna do, and then I just never do because I'm focusing on creating content or other channels or business relationships or the serfs. Where's the serfs? Is it Serfs TV? I'll pay $2. Oh, is that it? That might be it. Does he have a dog character? Is that what it is? Memes of production, the Serfs Ghoulery. Okay, join for free. He's making $500 a month. I'll pay $2. Well, hold on. Skip for now. Let's see if we can get access to it. Upgrade to unlock. Yeah. Okay. I'll pay Lance from the Serfs $2 in order to get access to the Jesse Singal thing. I'll make more than $2 off of ad revenue alone to justify this luxurious purchase. Move money, transfer a couple of dollars from here. I don't keep all my stuff in the same account because I don't want my debit card to get ripped. Continue. So sorry if this is boring. I hope you guys are entertaining yourselves in chat and having a good time. But to be honest, I am hurting today. Oh yeah, we're good. We're good. Oh, we got the whole thing. All right. I'm excited. It's gonna be a new train wreck. It's gonna be fun. All right. Thank you, whoever said that it's available on his Patreon. Lance just got $2 from me, and we are going to get hours of entertainment. Sen Patty says, like the stream. Indeed, like the stream. Ensort says, yeah, the debate was a train wreck, but it does appear that the church burnings were a random coincidence. Well, truth be told, I don't think the church burnings were a random coincidence. I know, like, I'm putting it at 90%, 95%. There was arsonists who were using the outrage against the church as a pretext with which to burn the churches down. But let's just say I'm wrong. Let's say that Ensort, you're totally right, and it was just some random arsonist that had nothing to do with the accusations of mass graves. Well, Lauren was being a huge a-hole about the dead kids, and effectively, like, the primary place, Kamloops, Kamloops, they finally came out and they're like, yeah, we haven't even done any kind of excavations to confirm who's actually buried here because it is a traditional cemetery. And we already know that it's like a mix of students and staff. And so there's actually not like a Native American Holocaust here. It's just like a normal burial site. So we're not even going to bother with excavations. So Lauren was being a massive asshole, but she was totally right. Jonazilla says, I'm pretty sure that debate came up in a Nicholas Diorio video I watched yesterday. It's all anyone knows the Serfs for. Yeah, and Nick did, even though Nick follows me on Twitter, he didn't mention me. He was like, oh yeah, Lauren Southern and the Serfs made that guy look like an asshole. Are we cooking content or burgers today? Content mostly. Old School says, wait, Lance is still alive? I thought he died of cringe. Yeah. Ensort says, now hold on. Doesn't streaming something behind a paywall affect fair use? No. Why would it? I do. So fair use. I need to repost all my shit to different to Twitter and Discord and all that. But no, fair use has nothing to do with whether or not something is paywalled. As a matter of fact, I use paywalled content all the time for my breakdowns, and I'll be using Disney paywalled content, which is kind of a risk because they're very litigious. But the No, fair use has to do with like, are you transforming the original content? How much of the content are you using? Are you serving as a market replacement? And are you increasing or decreasing the value of the original product through your use? So no, fair use has nothing to do with getting access to paywalled content. Like just because something is available on YouTube and you use it for your content doesn't mean it's fair use. And just because something's paywalled and you use it doesn't mean it's fair use. Eric Dom says, Connor, financing the socialist revolution. Well, it is more commies for me to shoot later on, so I guess that's good. Yeah. Unork says, Lance's alt account recommended it. Based. Miles Otwell, have you ever done kettlebell workouts? That shit destroyed me. Yeah. I don't, but I should. I think the reason why a lot of people like kettlebells is because kettlebells is a combination of strength and mobility, because you can kind of use the U-shaped hook in order to move in different directions that you typically can't with a dumbbell, or is not as comfortable with a dumbbell. Surf and Turf would be a good podcast name. Well, funnily enough, on the Valor Media Network, there's a podcast called Surf and Turf. You should check it out. It's Army Special Forces veteran and Navy SEAL veteran talking about personal development. Conservative liberalism says they did GPR, ground penetrating radar, at one of those boarding schools and found a mass grave that ended up being a septic system. Whoops. Who's buried in Camden? That can't be right. He's supposed to be playing first base in the ball game tomorrow. I don't know if that's a joke, but I'm very tired, so it's hard for me to do it. Wait, who's on second base? Philip Coffey says that debate was when I started paying more attention to Lance and realizing how little respect he was owed. All right, we're being mean. Let's get cracking, but I need to do something first. Sorry, I'm going to be a little slow today, but I promise you, as I get caffeinated and as I absorb psychic damage, I will speed up. Let's go to this website, which is YouTube. Thank you. We already have like 15 likes and we got 30 people in chat. That's like a 50% like ratio. You guys are doing great. But remember to like the stream. It's free. Super chats and memberships if you got them as the stream goes on, as you feel like you want to endorse my content so we can corrupt the world with grill hotism. Actually, you know what? Enlighten the world with grill hotism. I'm not even going to pretend that we're a corrupting force. We're not. We are a force for good on the world stage. And then what else was I thinking? You guys are already on Valor Media Network, so I guess follow Counterpoints, the VOD channel, and watch the VODs and comment on the VODs. Going to announcements at everyone. I'm live here. No, I don't want just Isaac Nightmare. That's funny though. So I'm gonna tag one person in my Discord and tag him and tell him that he needs to be watching our live. Then I'm going to go to Twitter. And truth be told, I've gotten lazy. You're supposed to separate your links. You know what? I'll do it just to be nice. Pop. There we go. We're almost done. I promise, guys. Just give me one more minute to get set up. Like I said, I'm hurting a little bit today. Then I need to go to, you know what? No offense to DGG. I love them. Some of you are DGG, etc. But like, if I go live on my home channel, then I have like a 200 plus people, super engaged, having a good time, all that kind of bullshit. Then I'm like, hey, go over to Valor Media Network. We're doing the same content over there. We're having fun. We're having a good time. And then I have to go post. When I post to my Twitter, when I post to my YouTube, we do get an additional like 20 to 30 people who show up. And it's like, we have the same schedule, guys. What the fuck? But anyways, let's bullshit with chat a little bit more before we get cracking. Let me find my caffeine. N Sort says, oh my God, Connor doesn't know on who's on first joke. Yeah, I do. It's you. Get it? because the who's on first joke is about like people being confused about names, and then the you thing is like an Asian guy whose name is you, and everybody gets confused by it. I don't know who's on third. It's you. Hunter Dombrowski says hi, counter in chat. Hi to you. Conservative Liberalism says, yo, Hunter 07. Shadow 2 Bravo, good to see you, my friend. It says, good morning, my fellow members of the Gorilla Band. Nice. Like the video. True. A VIP only stream. True. Old School says, can we make Mike from PA disappear like Lance did? No. Unfortunately, Mike actually probably has an above average IQ. Now, he's not as smart as he thinks he is, but I actually bet. I would have to say, Mike is probably as intelligent as I am. I would say that if you IQ tested him, he'd be in the 120s or the 130s. But he's such a socially inept, stoner, degenerate freak. And I mean that with the utmost respect to my stoner degenerate freaks, but hopefully you're not 300 pounds with a Hassan Piker style skin-walking haircut, smoking endless amounts of pot, eating endless amounts of DoorDash while you talk about the communist revolution. So, yeah. Possum Nation says Surf and Turf is a very different and much worse communist version than Surf and Turf. Yeah. Surf like peasant and then Turf like trans exclusionary radical feminist. I wish I had endless time to make endless content. Because even though I'm not a TERF, or technically a Surf, I would love to back that show. Hadonna Treadmill says, I'm tired as fuck making hash browns. Yeah, bro. I need the chat. I'm sorry, I need the chat. I do need the chat, but I need the caffeine. For sure. For sure. I am hurting. Melody says, morning. Oh, we're actually going to watch the Serfs. Was not sure it would interest you that much. Well, truth be told, Melody, many people outside of Twitch and YouTube politics, the Serfs debate was so bad that that debate between the Serfs, Lauren Southern, me, and Taylor Twin Rabbits was so bad that commentary, it's like a legend in the commentary community where they're like, what was that one debate where Lauren Southern annihilated Lance from the Serfs? And that debate I was 25% of, and I would say arguably one of the more competent debaters. If you like Lauren more than me, that's totally fine, but I would like to think that I'm actually a little bit more competent than Lauren in that debate. Miles Dotwell says, are you able to summarize the Diorio drama? The recent one? The one in the past 48 hours? Yeah, sure. What was it? Dan was being a psycho and like stalking and doxing random people from Twitch, and also somebody was trying to rip his content, and so he was stalking and doxing that guy. And then Nick Diorio and him had an argument about, what was it? Come on, man. What was it about? I'll just pull it up. How about we just pull it up? How about I stop trying to make shit up with my neurons that are not properly firing, and I pull it up real quick. It'll be like a 30-second. Oh, dude. My thumbnail is me rubbing my eye in the worst way possible. Nicholas Diorio. Go to Dan. It was something like principled. Oh, it was about whether or not Hassan Piker doxed somebody by pulling up their public-facing profiles. And Dan was effectively arguing that Hassan Piker was a piece of garbage for flashing a gun on stream and publicly doxing someone. And Nick Diorio was like, you're an idiot. That's not doxing. If that is doxing, then technically Destiny doxed Mike from PA by saying Mike from PA 5 years ago. That's stupid as shit. And then they actually had like a pretty bitter fight. And then Nick was like, oh yeah, Dan's a psycho. And then he didn't want to hang out with Dan anymore. What? Did I hear Degen Stoner Freak? Dominic Galletta says, I like that piece on Valor with Daniel Carcillo, ex-hockey player. It was great. Oh, yeah. The guys who do the sports show Lowlights and the game within. Lowlights is great. Sin Patty says, what if I have around 250, don't care for communism, but I'm a stoner G-Gen? I'll work the mines and it'll give me some gas. Cool. What if I hover around 250? That's fine. I'm 230. Don't care about communism based, but I'm a stoner D-Gen. I'll work the mines if you give me some gas. Yeah, that's fine. Whatever. As long as you can climb the stairs. I mean, I climb stairs and I get a little winded, but that's just because I don't do cardio. I just lift. But, you know, as long as you don't have the Hassan Piker Skinwalker haircut, I think we're all right. Philip Coffee says nothing wakes a guy up like mental anguish. Well, speaking of which, we'll get started in a second. Sin Patty says, oh, that Diorio drama, laugh my ass off. I thought something else happened. No, him and Dan from Anything Else with Steven, they got into a fight in the past couple of days. True Zealot says, daughter has left her bed for mine for the last 7 nights. No rest for the wicked or otherwise. Whoever coined the term terrible twos obviously did so before the kid turned 3. What is sleep? Well, True Zealot, I wouldn't fight it. You know, my wife co-sleeps with the baby. I know it's not recommended when they're small, but whatever. And realistically, you know, True Zealot, you know, I'm not trying to project my own bullshit onto you, but the reason why we don't care about it as much is because there's only going to be so long that your kids are going to want to be around you, right? When they're teenagers, they're going to want to hang out with their friends. When they're adults, they're going to be so busy with their own shit that, you know, you'll get to see them for holiday events, but you're going to have to go out of your way to hang out with your kids because, you know, you're going to have to go seeking them out. So there's only going to be so long in their lives where they're very small, where they're going up to find you and hug you and cuddle you. And you should probably cherish that as maximally as possible. At least that's what the wife and I think about it. Jonah Zilla says, I'm finally starting to feel normal and not sick. Nurgle be gone. Sickness be gone. That's a It's Always Sunny reference for those of you who don't get it and just think I'm a freak. Haterade says, I've been meaning to watch you on this channel, but I didn't change the notifications to remind me when you're live, but I did this time. Well, thank you, Haterade. I appreciate that. Thank you, King. Redacted from redacted, exactly. Tagarung says, stoner lungs are protected against the coal dust. True. Sacred Snow says, showing their online handles to a large audience is technically doxing under Twitch TOS, if I'm not mistaken, but it's also not doxing unless you're linking your personal information on public socials, which is r-slurred. Yeah, Twitch might have it written down in a very silly way, but if I say Hassan Piker, I'm assuming Hassan Piker is Hassan Piker's real name, right? His dad's name is Met Piker. So by saying the word Hassan Piker, which is his public-facing persona, it's his real name, and I know his father's name, and I just said that. Did I dox him by saying his real name? Obviously, that's crazy. Did we do our Grill Hottie anthem? Yes. So it's auto-played for I'm a Never Trump guy in the very beginning, and then I did see Weld QC John in chat, so I read the Grill Hottest prayer. So... Puzzlehead says, morning from Laguna. Good morning, sir. Fashion 40 says, Legal Mindset is talking about Lawtube versus Hassan Piker and his orbiters right now. That's cool. Law shit is dry to me. Dank Brandon says, we keep the house too dark to see at night and we sleep downstairs and there's a playroom cage in front of my room. My kid don't sleep with me. Oh man, you're giving him some trauma, but you know what? Trauma builds character, so maybe he'll be a good stand-up comedian. Yeah, Rob with AWB says, finally I can decode Hassan's username and dox him. Dox confirmed, yeah. True Zealot says, is it better to super chat here, wait for the Counterpoints channel stream, or another method? Would prefer to give you this biggest cut possible. No offense to the mega lib owners of the channel. Yeah, so what I'll do, I'll go ahead and let's get into the content first before we do anything. But I'll generate a PayPal link if you want to send it to me individually. And let me explain the breakdown. So I need to generate a certain amount of revenue, and it's not anything crazy. It's reasonable, but I need to generate a certain amount of revenue for Valor Media Network in order to effectively replace my salary. And if I do so by October, then we're just going to continue in perpetuity. And my salary is not very large. It's enough. It's basically enough to help me pay my bills. So as a result, we kind of got there before demonetization. Like we were at 80% of my salary before we got demonetized, and then that obviously slowed everything down. So, basically, your super chats here kind of guarantee my ongoing relationship with Valor Media Network, and they are subsidizing us through October. And so, as a result, you're basically saying, I value this content. I want Connor to do well. Here's a tip through super chat. That way we can keep it going. But that money doesn't go to me. That goes to Valor Media Network. If you're like, hey, Connor, I parasocially love you so much that I want you to be able to A, pay your bills, but B, buy a delicious cheeseburger, then sending it through the PayPal or donating on Tuesdays goes directly to me. Sacred Snow says, to be fair, I'm thinking posting a rando's real name is sus. If not doxing, it's substantively different if they are a public figure. Sure, but I think the randos were YouTube creators, and I think they just looked up his name. It was like some kind of like crypto reference mixed with something else. And so it was just like a YouTube handle. Sacred Snow says, can you not find address and whatnot based off of a full name? Yeah, probably. But that's the extra step. And that is morally incumbent upon the person who is looking up additional public information in order to harass said person. Philip Coffey says, we co-slept with our kid. We spent lots of time together. I took her out every weekend to play, hang out. Now she's just a chill teenager. Would recommend. Yep. Son Patty says, we love Connor so much. We live in the walls. It's cramped in here. Well, that's based. All right. Let's chug a little bit of caffeine. Let's do a little bit of an intro and let's get cracking. Okay. Let me full screen the content. Let me present. Let me share screen. Let me add audio. Let me share it, add to stage, remove from stage, and let me do an intro. All right. Hi, guys. My name's Connor. I'm a science fiction, political, and philosophy nerd, a Marine Corps and law enforcement veteran, and I am a Never Trump Republican. Meaning, somebody asked me, what's the Never Trump Republican? And I said, or I thought, it is a Republican who hates the current Republican Party. Like, it's the principles of republicanism divorced from the current political machine, which is very sad. But anyways, I have fire content for you today. This is Lance from the Serfs versus Jesse Singal. Jesse Singal is a heterodox liberal who talks about gender issues. Therefore, he pisses off all of the far lefties. And then I'm just going to be mean to Lance from the Serfs, and I'm just going to say that he's a political commentary leftist midwit. And so he oftentimes gets himself into trouble through not understanding what words mean, but virtue signaling about said words. So we're going to go ahead and watch these two people battle it out. It should be fun. I'll be pausing intermittently to break it down. Let us enjoy the psychic damage together.
Time to join me. Do you want to quickly tell our audience a little bit about who you are?
Yeah, my name's Lance. I'm a, I suppose, comedian from Canada who covers news, politics, tries to make it entertaining. But like most people who spend a lot of time on the internet, obviously waste a little bit too much of my life on slop and other brain-rotting material.
As do we all. Yeah, so this, I explained in the intro, but this talk came about because, you know, you were somewhat critical of me and some of the stuff I've written and said about youth gender medicine. And Katie and I have found that often when people criticize us, they're unwilling to then have a conversation. So I appreciate that. I'm going to let you sort of take the reins here. I will say to your audience, there was a miscommunication. I didn't expect this to be video. I look a little bit haggard from 4th of July drinking and a little bit of illness. So be merciful. But other than that, take it away.
Yeah, so I obviously have some pretty strong critiques of your work, and you know, I'm quite excited to have the opportunity to bring them up in person. I figured we'd use the infamous article that you published in The Atlantic, the cover story when kids say they're trans, kind of as a jumping off point. so we can go through it. And I'm pretty sure you'll probably hear a lot of these critiques before, but I went through the article again and reread the entire thing and wanted to kind of just break down each piece of it. And in the article, obviously, you spoke to a lot of people who had detransitioned, including Claire, Max Robinson, Carrie Stella, Carrie Callahan, and Delta. And for about the first 9,000 words of the piece, there's not really a single example of a well-adjusted or happy trans person who had gone through the process. Obviously, the examples that you use, starting with Claire, for example, you often invoke the fact that they had been suffering from depression, and that you believe, or at least the testimonies are leading you to believe, that this has something to do with outside influences that had somehow impacted their decision to want to transition in the first place. Is that fair?
Yeah, I mean, I will say I think you're lifting that language almost directly from Slate. The way Slate put it was, as the piece goes on, notably without a single happy, well-adjusted trans teen among its host of central characters for the first 9,000 plus words.
So this is where lefty analysis kind of divorces from reality, which is effectively like, you must have the message at all times. And for those of you who are unaware, the message is a meme from actually quite an annoying video reviewer named The Critical Drinker. I still watch The Critical Drinker every now and then because I feel like his criticisms can be insightful, although his constant negativity, even on fun media, is kind of like off-putting after a while, where you're like, at what point are we just not being assholes to be assholes? But the message is effectively like rabid progressivism. That's the message. And so if like the way that Lance would want Jesse Singal to write a piece about trans kids who detransitioned because they weren't really trans, they got caught up in the gender affirming machine, and then as a result they were actually misdiagnosed and went through a lot of like medical issues. Like, the way that he would want that to go down is first, a land acknowledgement that we live on stolen land, then an acknowledgement of the genocide in Gaza because there's something going on that's more important than anything else we discuss. Then, the fact that 99.9% of all trans kids are perfectly happy with their identities. And therefore, gender affirming care is the correct way to go, regardless of any evidence that might be contradictory. And then finally, you could have a few interviews with detransitioners. That's how Lance from the Serfs would like that piece to have been written. That's how progressives would have liked that piece to have been written. And Jesse Singal did not follow that formula and therefore is in trouble with the leftists. Puzzlehead says, anyone watch Sagar Tucker interview? No, I have a feeling that's insufferable, but maybe that's why we should add it to the docket list. Sagar versus Tucker. Do they just like laugh back and forth at each other about how dumb the war in Ukraine is? Sagar Tucker. Excuse me. Sapien says, why listen to the Serfs? If I want to listen to a R slur, I'll talk to myself. For the psychic damage and the memes. Mr. October says Lance Ass is still on YouTube. Yep. Rob says apparently Grok has been doing some racisms. Yeah, I know. It's pretty funny. Gen X says good morning. Good morning to you, Gen X. John says Drinker is a grifter. I don't know if he says things he doesn't believe. He could just be an idiot. But if you mean that he's like constantly capitalizing on negativity surrounding media, yeah. I mean, what was the thing? He did like a Warhammer 40K criticism about female custodies that was like way off. He had no idea what he was talking about. Sapien Green says Grok is the offspring of an African, so it can use the N-word. Oh, Lawson says quick 20-second side quest. In and out. In and out. 20-minute side adventure. Morty, don't worry about it. Oh my God. All right. Back to it. Sorry, I'm engaging with chat more than I should right now because I know how painful this is going to be. Oh, Tiger Room says a lot of people on the right get cruel about the trans stuff, but internal critiques from the left are way harder to dismiss, which is why they get such savage pushback. Yeah, and Jesse Singal has been called out as like a particularly virulent transphobe, despite being like a liberal and a progressive on the topic. Yeah. All right. Oh, True Zealot says, well, number one, Shadow 2 Bravo says, Sagar and Tucker makes me want to sunset myself. Well, we'll check that out for sure then. True Zealot says, introduced the Serfs without mentioning the mass graves debate. You and Lauren Southern crushed him in. You're a better person than me. No, I'm not. Right before we get back into the content, I know I'm screwing up the flow of the content, but Lauren Southern and I and the Serfs, and then this guy is Lance from the Serfs. The Serfs and Tale of Twin Rabbits, we had a debate about like indigenous genocide and church burnings several years ago. And the general consensus is that Lance and his friend got so destroyed terribly. And it was so bad. The internet backlash to the left side of that debate was so bad that Tale of Twin Rabbits like left the internet for like 90 days in the wake of that debate.
There's a lot of trans adults cited further up in the story, but because of the structure of the story, yeah, I think it's trans adults. I wouldn't call Delta like a full-blown detransitioner. I'd call her a desister, but yeah, I think some of the detransitioners are higher up than the Orion Foss, and there was another kid who was sort of a happily transitioned young person. So yeah, in terms of the structure of it, I think that's mostly true.
So yeah, Slate's one of the many articles that I had to read to basically see the opposing sides that have already been brought up in relation to you. But I wanted to go a couple steps further. So I actually broke down each one of their stories in words themselves, which that article didn't have. So Claire, it's 1,312 words related to her personal story. Max Robinson, 1,086 words related to
Are we not allowed to document the stories of trans people? What the fuck is this point?
her personal story. Carrie Stella, 100 words. Carrie Callahan, 530 words. Delta, 569 words. So that's approximately 3,600 words for all of the detransitioning stories. And then at the very end, there's what I considered, I suppose, the more positive stories. Scott Padberg, which him, 569 words. And then Orion Floss, him, which is 584.
Lawson says, Connor, I posted the link to the funniest part of that debate from Destiny's POV. I don't know if links in YouTube chat is a thing, though. Yeah, so if you can DM it to me on Twitter, CounterConnor, CounterConor. That's probably the easiest way to do it. I think we have links disabled on YouTube, so I'm not able to see. If you posted a link in YouTube, I'm not able to see it.
So the bulk of the article is dedicated to telling the stories of detransitioners and oftentimes highlighting things, not only that they had suffered depression, but in some cases that they had been sexually assaulted. In the case of Max Robinson, it talks about how she was raped at 13 years old. And then you felt necessary to include that at 14, she had watched her friend be sexually assaulted by another man. And then obviously bring up the depression and anxiety disorder that she experienced. And then in that case, as well as others such as hers and Claire's, there's obviously the implication that, so for Max Robinson, it was that she was watching the Tyra Banks show and that she'd seen a sex worker, Buck Angel, talking about transition that influenced her decision. In Claire's case, it was a YouTuber. But this seems to be a frequent theme that you were highlighting between all of them. And I think my big point here is that on a topic of which the rates of transition and detransition are becoming clearer and clearer with more and more studies that come out, and obviously in terms of detransition, the rates are quite low. You chose to focus primarily. We'll get to.
Number one, I don't think Lance is smart enough in order to actually convey the information relevant to this topic. Number two, I'm pretty sure I know that Jesse is. And so this is probably going to be a bloodbath.
Get to this part, right? We'll get to the part where we can go back and forth and we can talk about study after study. But even in the article itself, right, you mentioned that, there's one study that references that detransition rates are very low at 2%. However, we can't truly know. I think what you've done here is effectively use a lot of anecdotal evidence as well as selective interviews to try and highlight a narrative that you yourself are trying to craft, which is that in each one of these cases, we have people who had been influenced by outside sources, oftentimes that experienced severe trauma. And then for a reader who had never or doesn't know anything about this topic, if they come across this article and this is their introduction to
You know what? I'm not going to lie. I viciously dislike the Serfs' politics. He's been personally nice to me, so I feel bad being mean to him. But I think this guy's been mewing, you know? I think he's been mewing. Look at that jawline. His face is like a frickin' rectangle. Good for him, you know? Like we can hate on the Lance. We can hate on Lance for a variety of reasons. We can think he's a blockhead. We can think he's not particularly intelligent. We can make fun of his perspectives. We can make fun of him trying to struggle session people in the year of our Lord 2025. But you know what? Look at that jaw. It's like a perfect L shape. So I'll go ahead and congratulate him on that.
To trans people and the concept of transitioning, for example, they're going to come away with a article where the vast majority and the bulk of it really shows that this is something in which people are either doing because of social contagions, peer pressure, and potentially even sexual assault or forms of depression and anxiety.
I'm going to phrase this as a question, though. So I know Gay Zach, the guy that I had a friend in high school. I know that he had a formative homosexual abusive experience. I probably know half a dozen to a dozen girls who had sex abuse as very young, like early teens, something like that. Either a cousin or an adult figure in their lives or whatever, like sex abuse them, and then that just correlated. I'm not saying it was the cause, but it correlated with promiscuity and antisocial sexual behaviors. So I'm kind of asking this more as a question to my gay audience members. Do you have a formative sex abuse experience that or like a traumatic early childhood sex abuse experience or like early adolescence sex abuse experience or not? Because my suspicion would be that there are people who are just genetically gay, right? Like they're just born gay. They've always been gay. There's nothing going on. But the correlates with sex abuse, I would actually want to check out, because obviously we want to minimize sex abuse as maximally as possible. But if Lance was correct that Jesse Singal was trying to correlate sex abuse along with exposure to gender nonconforming people as predictive of detransitioner people getting confused, I think that's a topic worth exploring. Obviously, it's like highly sensitive, but I would want to take a look at it, basically. Philip Coffey says, Lance on 9/11. There are lots of good, moral, life-affirming Muslims all over the world, and there was also a couple of plane crashes. Hedonic Treadmill says, Lance claims to be a comedian. I thought I was hallucinating. What a joke. Well, maybe that was one of his jokes. He made you laugh, so he is a comedian. KO Dave says, oh, yay, the trans debate, because good things always come from this. Well, the good news is that Lance, I think, is representative of the hyper woke internet perspective, and Jesse Singal is representative of the heterodox liberal perspective. So I think this is actually going to be, I think it's going to be fine. Cameron Mosley says, Lance is an F slur, R slur. Very rude of you. Lawson Harrison says, I don't have Twitter, but I sent it to you on Discord. Perfect. N-Sort says, Lance is severely out of his depth here. What does he know about trans stuff? He knows how to repeat talking points, so that'll be very useful to him and his audience. Tagarung says, don't compliment the Serfs. It makes me nauseous. Well, I got to be nice some of the time. Thank you, baby. Thank you. I asked for my wife to check on me and to bring me some water because I was going to be super dehydrated if she didn't. Sin Patty says, Lance doesn't know what he had for breakfast this morning, let alone about trans issues. Yeah, but how does he feel? How does he feel since he doesn't remember his breakfast? Tagrung says, remember, Connor, our ideological enemies are axiomatically evil. No, I know you're memeing. However, I'm going to go ahead and say in this community, because I feel like the Vosh Destiny acts out the my opponents are axiomatically evil. He just acts it out. He doesn't say it. He just does it. Vosh did the axiomatically evil or ontologically evil, therefore there's no bad things that I can do it. And it like festered in the far left to the point that now they're like cheering on like rape and death and murder and terrorism. So even as a joke, I think we're going to reject the ontologically evil memes. Jonahzilla says he should just drag his finger across his jaw instead of making an argument. Yes. All right. Let's continue.
Yeah, I mean, there's sort of a 700 or 800 word bit at the top of the story above all the stuff you're talking about, or most of it, that talks about transition working and how there's been a long history of trans people not having access to it. So I guess I just question who would read the story and come away confused about my stance on like whether some people should have access to this medicine. I think in some cases I was a little bit. Say again.
That wasn't my assertion. I said that you're crafting a narrative here for a first person or a first time reader on this topic who's going to walk away thinking that the majority of people who undergo transitioning eventually do detransition because the bulk of this is concentrating on, again.
But how would they come to that conclusion if I don't say that?
Because they would only read the first half of the article because they're stupid assholes.
Oh, because so as a journalist, and this is why I think that you are particularly crafty in what you do, it's not simply that you need to report on facts. I think that should be just the bare minimum, right? That you should be able to report factually on things that actually occur. But you are also crafting a narrative in what you choose to report on and what you choose to highlight and what you choose to actually bring a lot of attention to. And in the case of your story, I would say, again, the overwhelming majority is spent on people who had experienced severe trauma, depression, perhaps even sexual assault or rape.
And if that's factually true, what's the problem?
As children, and then at which point they had chosen to detransition, and you include that in the story to kind of craft the narrative so people reading it will then assume that or infer it.
Oh, he used infer properly, so I hope Gen X, if she's listening, she understands that the serfs used infer properly.
I think what I want people, what I was trying to get at with the article is that this is complicated, and when you're talking about young people and physical transition, especially permanent things like hormones, and I would argue puberty blockers shouldn't be considered reversible like they have been for a while. I think I might have even called them reversible in that. I don't think that's accurate anymore. I think it's complicated, and there's a big difference between a kid who has felt gender dysphoric their whole life and then is approaching puberty. I think a kid like that should be handled really differently from a kid like Max Robinson, where it comes on after a trauma. And what I've had trouble getting a straight answer from critics is like, it seems unlikely to me that you think gender identity exists in this sort of separate realm where it's totally separate. Or totally detached from someone's peer influence, from cultural influence, from trauma. So to me, like if you read the article, you will see some more complicated cases because that's what the article was about, but it shows a range of outcomes. Now, data-wise, we don't know like how many people detransition. The most well-known researcher on this is a trans guy named Kinnan McKinnon. He says, depending on the study you look at, I forget the exact range he gave, but it can be anything from 5 to 20%. I think it's probably not as high as 20%. It also depends how you define it. Unfortunately, in this article, this was 7 years ago now, but I said detransition was rare. I don't stand by that. I think we basically, in part because trans people since like the 1950s have been getting fucked over and not had a lot of good research done on trans medicine. I think we don't know what the detransition rate is, especially for kids who didn't go through sort of the normal clinical process of the Dutch protocol, which involves a lot of therapy, a lot of talking through, a lot of discussing comorbidity. So if you have data, setting aside the fact this article is from 2018, if you have data showing like a reliable detransition rate, I'm all ears. I just haven't seen it.
Okay. If you don't mind, can we get to that after this part? Because I wanted to kind of compartmentalize each one of these. So if we're still speaking about these.
Okay, I'm happy to, but let me just make one minor complaint, which is like if your whole thing is like I'm disproportionately focusing on X rather than Y, and my answer is, well, we don't know how X common is. You can understand, but
I totally agree with you, and I think that's a fair thing for me to have to disprove. So I've got a breadth of studies that I eventually wanted to start talking about, and
so then he's going to study bomb him. And what's interesting is we were talking about this yesterday with decoding the gurus. Is where is it? The lazy gardener is referring to things without the understanding. I don't want to get into the weeds and doesn't want to present solid evidence to reinforce your claims. This could be argued to be the lazy gardener That's funny. And then decorative scholarship. I think they reference decorative scholarship as well. Where Lance is saying like, oh yeah, I've read all these studies, but then he's not able to refer to them on the fly, which I think is awesome. I think it's awesome that we were watching content yesterday and we already have a couple of references to it. Fantastic. Although, to be fair, Lance is accusing Jesse Singal of debate edging, where he's implying through description but never making prescriptions. The only problem with this is that Jesse Singal will come out and tell you what he thinks. So, lol.
But then we'd move away from this topic, and you actually ask the question that, could you also ask that question a little bit later as well, because I want to answer it firsthand, because anytime you're like, I haven't seen a single one of my critics capable of answering or responding to this, I think that it's important to actually unpack those, but maybe it would be easier if we had a baseline of some.
So the study bomb KO Dave, the reason why I would call it that and say like, oh, he asked for it. So what people are typically asking for, though, when it comes to evidence is, just as an example, let's say that I take up a position, which is effectively that 80% of casualties, 90% of casualties within the global war on terror in Iraq were not caused by coalition forces. Well, you can say, what's your source for that? And I can say, it's the Iraq Body Count Project. And then you can go look at that, and we can confirm that what I'm saying is true. And that's a relatively straightforward process. However, if I say, well, there's a study from the Lancet that estimates 1 million. There's a study from US News that's around 500,000. There's a study from this place that's 200,000. And there's a study from this place that says 300,000. But realistically, they don't track all the perpetrators. And then the Iraq Body Count Project does track the perpetrators, but here's all the problems with it, blah, 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 blah. Well, effectively what it seems like you're doing is you're gish galloping the opponent, which gish gallop is another debate term. You're overloading your statements with so much information that it ultimately becomes not translatable in reference to the debate. So I would view, KO Dave, you can correctly say that Jesse asked for the information. However, I would say the lazy gardener technique is still being employed here, unless Lance says, actually, this study from Scandinavia, which has been replicated by this study out of the UK, shows that the detransition rate is less than 10% with an average of 8%. Then at that point, I would not consider him a lazy gardener. I would consider him an actual gardener. And I wouldn't consider that decorative scholarship. I would actually consider that just scholarship.
We can both agree with, so that I can actually try and see where the point of contention is. Would you agree with the assertion that, for example, homosexuals, gay people, were stigmatized heavily as being potential predators and pedophiles as a way of trying to
Okay, and
they still are. There's been a resurgence of that.
And do you agree that the majority of sexual offenders are cis heterosexual men?
I hate this. I hate this. I hate this so much, dude. Per capita. Dude, per capita. Per capita. Okay? Per capita. Per capita. All right. For those of you who don't understand why I just screamed like a monster who was being slowly killed, and for those of you who didn't look at the screen when I Googled per capita and said the word per capita 8 times, per capita means that you can isolate discrete populations. Let's say that cis heterosexual white people are 90% of the population. And let's say that gay people are 10% of the population. Okay. And let's say 60% of sex crimes are committed by cis white heterosexual people. I don't know why I added white, but whatever. And let's say 40% is committed by homosexuals. Well, since heterosexual cis people are 90% of the population, that means that they're actually on a per capita basis underperforming with their correlate within the population for sex crimes, whereas the homosexual population would be overperforming by 4%. Now, the reason why this is evil from the right-wing perspective is because they say, oh, well, this population overperforms within this kind of crime, therefore they're all evil, so we're going to treat all of them like shit, which is obviously very, very, very stupid. Because let's use black homicide statistics because that's the most common one, is that 13% of the population commits half of the homicides within the United States because the black community is 13% of the population. Well, when you actually isolate it down, it's not 13% because half of the population of black men or of the black population is women, and women are not committing the vast majority of homicides. So it's actually 6%. And then within that 6%, it's not males over the age of 40 and it's not males under the age of 12. It's actually males aged 12 to 40. So it's not, so you can eliminate those discrete populations. It's basically young men. And then furthermore, within the young men category, 90 to 95% of young men do not engage in homicide. So it's actually like a very small criminal subset of a population that's overperforming within the metric. So you should isolate that element, and then you should study it, and you should see what social programs and what law enforcement programs actually disincentivize homicide. That would be the way that you would do it if you were an honest actor. But the right wing doesn't do that. But I would view the left wing obfuscating statistics by not understanding per capita is very dumb. And it feels disingenuous, especially when the right wing has pointed out to you per capita 10,000 times. So let's do, let's just verify what Lance is saying real quick. The, what is it? Sex crimes by sexual orientation statistics. This is going to piss me off. I'm already angry. But, well, that woke me up. Sexual violence victimization. I don't know if this is going to give us the information that we want, but for example, nearly 80% of bisexual women and over 56% of bisexual men have reported experienced contact sexual violence in their lifetimes. Okay, 3 in 5 lesbian women and gay men have also reported experienced contact sexual violence. This is domestic violence. In contrast, just over half of heterosexual women are, and about 3 in 10 heterosexual men have reported contact sexual violence. Oh, I guess this might be rape, right? So for rape, 80% of bisexual women have experienced either sexual assault or rape, and 56% of bisexual men have reported some kind of sexual assault or rape. So this would point out, and this isn't to vilify the gay community or the queer community. I don't give a shit. You know, this is bad no matter what. If a heterosexual does it, incarcerate them. If a homosexual does it, incarcerate them. If a bisexual person does it, incarcerate them. I don't care who you are. But the truth is that it seems like sexual assault and rape is overrepresented in the queer community. And then perpetrators of sex crimes. Studies indicate that most perpetrators of child molestation are heterosexual. Only about 21% of perpetrators who assault boys are homosexual. But what is the homosexual population of the United States percentage? .6. So that's a 300% representation when it comes to sex crimes, like homosexual sex crimes. So again, this isn't to vilify gay people, but it is to be descriptively accurate. Holy shit. I'm not going to engage with chat because we'll be here forever, but I hope you appreciate my psychic damage because that hurt me. That hurt my feelings a lot.
Are cis heterosexual men?
Yes.
Probably.
The majority of
just
sexual
'cause that's
offenders.
the majority of
Per capita.
people. 'Cause
I'm just going to say per capita every time he brings this up. And if he brings it up repeatedly, he's actually going to drive me fucking insane. As a matter of fact, Lance, you owe me $2 for watching your dog shit point.
most offenders are male and most males are cis. Yeah, I would imagine. Yeah.
Okay, so granted that, if I wrote an article in which I was interviewing the victims of sexual assault, and I focused primarily on the victims of sexual assault who had been assaulted by homosexuals, even though they were telling their stories, this actually happened, and it was 100% factually true, do you understand then that I would be crafting a narrative that would further stigmatize homosexuals? Because I was focusing primarily, even though they were the minority of the offenders, I was crafting a narrative that when people read that story, they would read the personal testimonies of multiple people who had been assaulted and then walk away from that perhaps more frightened, contributing then to the stigmatization of gay people.
Okay, but if it's statistically true that gay people are represented at a 300% rate, you should still talk about that because the truth matters. LB says 80% of violent crimes are committed by men. No, I don't give a shit about that. You're going to be mad? No, I'm not. No, I'm not. Men are more violent than women, obviously.
So just to make the analogy fit, in this hypothetical article, you'd also interview people who are sexually assaulted by cis men.
Well, we're not doing cis or trans here. I'm doing heterosexual or homosexual. But yes, I would interview, say, 6 people who had been sexually assaulted by homosexuals, and then 1 person who had been sexually assaulted by a heterosexual.
Sorry, I have to pay attention to the content, but I want to address any pushback in chat. Rob says, to push a little, would you also agree that if you had a random sample of the population, if you get an offender, they're more likely to belong to the dominant group? Yes, of course. The numbers you read weren't per capita. It was actual abuse statistics. LB. You're the meme right now. So who cares if they're gay? Abuse is abuse. I said that. So don't argue with me in chat like we're disagreeing when we're not.
I mean, if your article was just about sexual assault and how common it is, I would find that odd. I think this analogy fails for a number of reasons. One of which is this is a pretty new medical protocol that's been around since 2008-ish, or Dutch did it a little bit earlier, and we don't know much about it. So I think if you're writing about a new thing where you don't know the base rates, I guess I'm just confused as to what in my Atlantic article you would find to be stigmatizing of trans people. Like what is
that all trans people, well, not all trans people, but a substantive amount of trans people aren't actually trans, that they were actually just sexually abused and confused by pop culture. I think that's what the accusation from progressives would be.
Quote in my article that you think, cast aspersions on trans people, the trans experience.
But just to be clear, you would agree that if I did that, that was demonstrating that I, as the person who's writing the article, the journalist in this case, was distinctly trying to push a narrative.
Sure, but he said it was disanalogous.
And
I'm going to start lifting weights, because if I don't lift weights, I think my heart might actually explode in my chest, and my blood pressure spike might actually explode a capillary behind my eye socket. And so in order to avoid imminent cardiovascular related death, I'm going to lift weights while listening to this. Holy shit.
In order to fearmonger towards homosexuals, that there are higher rates, I would disproportionately be crafting a narrative that isn't true in doing so. Just in my personal example. I'm not talking about your article. Just to finish that analogy.
Well, yeah, but you're trying to draw an analogy. I disagree with the analogy, but sure. Yeah, I'll get that. Yeah.
Okay. So, well, again, you're asking a question that I've already answered, because I think if you write an article in which the bulk of the article talks about the negative experiences that cis people have experienced, especially detransitioners who went through the process, anyone who walks away from reading that article where the vast majority of the words are spent interviewing people who had negative experiences are going to think that the overwhelming amount of trans people who undergo transitioning experience a negative effect. The majority of the article is
weren't
spent on
that.
interviewing it, right? There's only 2 people that you've interviewed in the article. Again, Scott Padberg, Orion Floss, who, by the way, both happen to be he, him. I'm also curious as to why every single person who's a detransitioner was a woman. Was that just the people who had been responding, or was that a personal choice?
You're asking whether detransitioners or the happily transitioned are biological females.
Yeah, so the detransitioners, aka people who are cis and always were cis, are all women, every single one of them. And then the people who I could say are close.
I don't know, Lance. Is there something that's worth studying about social contagion theory related to gender differences that leads to women who were always cis transitioning and then later regretting their transition? Should we study that, or is that vilifying trans people?
To happily transition trans people are both men, are both he, him. Was that a editorial decision, or was that just
in other words, so everyone involved was a natal female?
That's not my question. My question is, again, so the majority of people that you chose,
you're saying
Claire,
there were two happily transitioned people, and they were both trans guys.
Yeah, they were both men.
Of the 2, they were both. No, I mean there was no. I mean that's just like who the best stories were. There's also, if you go to a youth gender clinic today, 70 to 80% of the people at that clinic for youth services will be natal female. So it makes sense that's who you would find if you look for some kids to talk to.
So it wasn't a decision on your part. It was simply how this worked out.
How it shook out. Yeah.
Okay, understanding. Did you get to pick the photos that were used, out of curiosity? The pictures? Did you have any editorializing on that?
Oh my God. LB, you got to work with me here, okay? Well, QC John says, good morning, Connor in chat. Friendly reminder that God made iron workers so carpenters have heroes. True. LB says, who? Connor? That's not how math works, and that wasn't a per capita study. Okay. We're going to do this just for you. Homosexual abuse statistics. Okay, I don't know if I'm going to be able to find the exact one. So that you should be able to figure this out, LB. If you can't figure this out after this rant, then I don't think I'm going to be able to help you out. Okay, so the Bureau of Justice Statistics reported that the rate of violence victimization for lesbian or gay individuals was more than twice that of straight individuals. Okay, so I'm going to do this for you. What is the gay population of the United States percentage? I think they said it was 7. I'm probably going to round it up to 10. Okay, so let's just say it's 10. I'm literally going to bust out a fucking Excel spreadsheet for you. Drive.google.com. If you don't understand it at this time, after I explain this, then you are the fucking meme. Okay? So let's just say that there's 100 million people in the United States. 100, 100,000. That's the number. Okay? Where's the commas? Do they have commas? Format as currency, format as percentage, decrease decimal. Sure. And then more formats. I don't want currency. Number. Yeah, I want number. Let's do number. There we go. 100 million. Okay. Let's say 10% of this are gay. Well, actually, let's go ahead and make it even easier. 90,000,000. 90 million are straight. 10,000,000 are gay. Okay. I'm going to show you this because it's actually very simple conceptually. And if you don't understand it after I explain it, I'm going to lose my fucking mind. So they said that the rate, because we should all understand the word rate, is double in the gay community compared to in the straight community. So let's just say, as a matter of fact, let's go ahead and look up how many domestic or percentage of domestic violence in US. Sure. In the United States, approximately 41% of women and 26% of men experience intimate partner violence in their lifetime. Okay, so let's say, let's split this difference and let's just say 30%. Okay, so 30, let's just use this for, let's just talk about domestic violence right now. Okay, so 30% of the straight people are going to experience domestic violence at some point in their lives. Okay, 90 million times 0.30 is 27 million. So 27 million people in the straight community are going to experience domestic violence. Then they said that double the rate will experience domestic violence in the gay community. So 10 million multiplied by 0.6 is 6 million. Okay? So we can both see, because what Lance said here is that this number is bigger than this number. And anybody who's not an idiot goes, no shit. Okay? Hold on. I didn't get that right. It was 6 million. Enter. Okay. So this number is bigger than this number because this is the straight people, this is the gay people. Okay? We all understand this, right? More straight people commit more domestic violence than gay people, right? But the rate is higher. So if the gay population was the same size as the straight population, you would need to multiply it by 9 in order to get the same number. Then the domestic violence rate would be equivalent to 54 million people being abused in the straight population. So it's effectively double. So what we can say here is that, yes, more straight people abuse their partners than gay people, but the rate at which gay people abuse their partners is more statistically significant. Therefore, if they were equivalent population sizes, then it would be roughly double that of the larger population. So this is a fucking problem that we should try to make it look more like this. If you don't understand it after I just broke this down for you, I don't know what to fucking do for you. This is so obvious to anybody who understands rates that whenever a progressive talks about, like, yes, more white people commit crime than black people, and it's like, no shit, 60% of the population is white. Please understand rate, or I will lose my fucking mind.
Does the author of you're asking if the author of an Atlantic piece gets to choose the photos? No,
I'm just asking if you had any editorial decision making. I'm just asking. This is not my line of work, right? So I'm having to ask you. But I'm curious.
So what happened here, unfortunately, was a trans model signed a release giving the editors permission to use their, I believe they used they them pronouns at the time and still do, to use their image on the cover. Then after the article came out and they were unhappy about it, they said that they had been lied to somehow, which I've never quite understood, because to me, if I sign a release saying you can use my photo in this, but if there's more to that story, you can let me know. But that a lot of people were complaining about that. I feel like that was unfair to the art department, who just like followed the rules completely and got a release from the model. But I don't know. I don't have anything to do with that decision because I'm a freelancer and a writer, not a photographer.
Right, absolutely. But just to be clear, it's he, him. So it uses he, him pronouns, and he was featured on the cover of the article. Do you not think it was unfair to him that, the way that the article used his photo and then said, your child says she's trans, she wants hormones and surgery, she's 13. That effectively not only misgendered him, but then outed him as being trans to his family through the process, something that's extremely dangerous for anyone who's LGBTQ+.
Do you think that if a trans person is in the closet and doesn't want to be outed, they should participate in a photo shoot about trans people?
That wasn't my question, though. Your answering question was a question. I'm just telling you the reality of what happened as a result of being in that photo shoot.
So this person was outed against their will?
According to his testimony, yes.
I guess okay. So like, I look stereotypically Jewish. I have a big nose. You don't have to respond to that, but it's true. If I felt like I didn't want people to know I was Jewish, and I signed my name to a form saying this is going to be a photo gallery of Jewish people, and then I complained this outed me as Jewish, that would seem pretty silly to me, because I signed a piece of paper saying I'm giving you permission to use me for this story about being Jewish. So I guess that's always confused me. I think maybe what this person should have done if they didn't want to be outed or weren't out is not participate in a photo shoot about trans youth, but I can't speak to their experience or his experience. I'm sorry.
So it's kind of a fuck around and find out scenario.
Fuck around in the sense of signing a thing saying I'm being photographed for a story about trans youth.
Okay.
Is that what you mean by fuck around? Well, actually, can I just ask you though, if you do you get what I'm saying? That like if you sign something saying I'm choosing to be featured in this magazine, I mean, what do you think should have happened?
I think that there's a large amount of people.
Yeah. Sorry, I need to pay attention to the content, or else chat is going to keep pissing me off. Lance is arguing that somebody who participated in an article about trans youth was outed as trans by the article. Why would you participate in an article and a photo shoot if you didn't expect it to be public? That's the point that Jesse Singal is making, and I think it's a valid point.
We're trying to get into a very difficult field, such as modeling or anything related to that. And so if you sign up for something where it's like, hey, by the way, this is a casting call, we're going to be talking to different teens, their views on transition. And that's essentially what the casting call was, according to the article that was written about this. And in relation to that, they were not aware, when this was taking place, that, he was going to be used in this respect to be an article that is now considered to be highly controversial. And then
he was aware,
end
though,
result
because
was
he
that
signed a release giving.
Oh, absolutely. I'm not saying that this is
permission.
illegal. That would be a different accusation, right? I'm saying, yeah, you signed a release. I mean, at the end of the day, the Atlantic had the legal rights to do with whatever they wanted with it, right? When I say
and morally, you have no claim if you sign a release and you're a legal adult saying you can use my photo for this. You have no moral claim if someone then uses your photo for it.
No, you can still criticize like morally if something was misused in a way that you didn't think was appropriate. However, you signed a legal release, then you can still make a moral claim. But I'm still with Jesse in this line of argumentation. You're an adult. If you want to be treated like an adult, you want to act like an adult, you want to claim adulthood, you want equal rights, you want equal this, equal that, then you have to act like an adult.
Right, but you don't think that it's at all unfortunate then? Maybe that's a way of putting it. That as a result,
I guess I'm curious how this person was outed by being on the cover. Do you have the backstory on that?
Yeah, so according to the article that's in them.us, Brewer's photo appeared on the cover to illustrate a story about Jesse Singal, a journalist who's covered the trans community in notably dishonest terms in the past. The cover line in Brewer's photo appeared next to your child says she's trans, she wants hormones and surgery, she's 13. Brewer told Pointner that he used they them pronouns at the time, but now he uses he him pronouns. That was 22 years ago, and it outed his gender identity to his immediate family and members before he felt ready to tell them. He didn't know much about the story that his photo would be used to illustrate. He'd originally responded to an open casting call by photographer so-and-so who was working for the New Yorker and the New York Times for a photo shoot on an article about gender dysphoria that was debating different views on teens wanting to transition.
Sorry, I'm sorry, current pronouns is he or they, he, right?
He, him, yeah.
Okay, so he signed a form saying I'm participating in a photo shoot about teens seeking to transition, right?
Yeah.
Okay. We might have to agree to disagree on this one, because to me, if I sign a form saying I'm participating in a photo shoot about this sensitive issue, it just doesn't makes sense to then say I was outed against my will. And I think that's really unfair to sort of the art folks at the Atlantic who that's a really tough story to illustrate. I have no idea how I would have done it, but I don't think they did anything wrong. But
well, they took a photo of him. They used the photo for the cover of the Atlantic. And then in that picture, right beside it, it says, she wants hormones and surgery. She's 13. She was 22 at the time. Sorry, he was 22 at the time in this case. So he was 22 years old. But this front page now says she's 13. She wants hormone surgery right beside his photo. Right, which again, you don't think that it is all irresponsible to put that in giant words right beside his picture?
It's just I feel like there's a crossed wires here because like so if there's a photo of about youth soccer in Time magazine and they get a bunch of kids and put them in a soccer uniform, those kids that no one looking at that is like that's a real kid who actually plays soccer. It's you're modeling like you can use a model's image in a lot of ways. Your complaint is that it was inaccurate about their gender identity.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, well, first off, I think like anyone looking at this cover.
So if it was inaccurate about their gender identity, couldn't they have just told their family, hey, I did a photo shoot and they didn't tell me how they were going to use the picture? Couldn't that have solved that issue? You're an adult. You signed the piece of paper. You did the photo shoot. Live with the consequences. This is moral frogging.
And especially if you're not familiar with this topic and you see his face and then you see the words, misgendering him and, saying that he's 13 years old. This implication is probably for some part of the story, one of the other people that you interviewed, because this person, he's not even featured in your article, right? But in so doing, that's part of the aspect that I think is also disingenuous. And I understand.
Oftentimes a magazine cover will like speak and sort of like that's the kind of scenario the story's about. What do you do if your kid wants to go on hormones or get surgery?
Right. So and again, this is something that you have nothing to do with. You didn't pick the words that would appear on the cover of the Atlantic. That was their own editorial decision.
So you're just moral frogging about it because you want a moral frog. Got it. Thanks, Lance. Great content as always.
But it's just something that you also don't feel morally conflicted about because
he
had agreed to it.
I feel pissed off because it's fine if this person was unhappy with their decision to participate in the photo shoot, that's fine. I felt like the Atlantic got a little bit of a raw deal because they didn't do anything wrong, and I still haven't heard from you what they did wrong.
Well, I think the first thing that they did wrong was put in giant bold letters that he is a 13-year-old, he is a she. And that again, anyone who's seen this cover, for example, if you were the family members of like his family, obviously, I suppose, according to him, saw this cover, recognized him, and then was like, whoa, that at the time he was going by they them, but now based on this cover, it says that you're a 13-year-old who wants hormones and surgery, and it turns out that he in fact was trans and has undergone gender affirming care, but that was information that his family was not privy to. So your defense of that is just that he shouldn't have done the photo shoot in the first place. Then, if that was
well, sorry, what information was his family not privy to?
The fact that he was trans.
So why are you participating in a photo shoot about trans people if you don't want your family to know that you're fucking trans, Lance? Listen, I'll say the thing that Jesse should be saying, okay? That's what Jesse should be saying. If you don't want to be known as trans, why are you participating in a photo shoot exclusively for a trans story? Obviously. It's so pedantic. It's not even pedantic. It's so paternalistic. Like, you can do everything that everybody else does, except for when you reap the consequences of your behavior, you have to hide behind your identity. This is why there is resentment against progressives. This is why there's resentment against people, cry bullies, who cry foul in the gay community when they do shit like this. If you don't want to participate, don't fucking participate. If you do participate and you reap consequences, nobody feels bad for you. This applies to everything. This applies to everything and everyone at all times. Just because you're brown or Muslim or disabled or gay or trans and you reap the consequences of your behavior, nobody gives a shit. Welcome to being an adult, dumbass.
But he signed a release to be in
a photo shoot related to trans stuff. Yes. Go ahead and get pissed off, Jesse, and say you're a fucking idiot.
Dude, I'm sorry. I feel bad. Like he signed a release saying I'm going to be in a photo shoot about trans kids. Right.
Right. So in that sense, it's on you, right? Like you made that decision.
Just own it, Jesse. You're being too nice. Say yes. They participated in a trans photo shoot. They knew it was going to be a trans photo shoot. They got outed to their own family. That's their fucking problem. If they didn't want to do it, then they shouldn't have signed the release and they shouldn't have participated in the photo shoot. Just say it.
Yeah, that's what a photo release is. The
irresponsible.
reason to sign a photo release is to say, I'm letting my photo out into the world. I think I got the sense he was unhappy with the article, which he has every right to be, but
Well, I guess
yeah.
if you want to ask for an extreme comparison, if there was a photo shoot of, say, me and they used my photo and it was in an
Yep.
interview where I was discussing, say, how much I hate white supremacists or white supremacism, and they used my picture on the cover, and then all of a sudden there was a quote beside it, and it was like the leading white supremacists in Canada, but my picture was right there, and I'm in the article speaking out against that, I would say that was a disingenuous way of using my photo, even though I'd signed a release form, even though I'd agreed to be part of this photo shoot.
Hey, yes, we are fucking suffering. That's what we're doing.
They were manipulating the way my picture is now being perceived by the public.
I think your argument would be right.
Biz D says, I bet this argument goes really hard on Blue Sky.
If they had listed the model's name and if it wasn't like such an abstracted photo illustration. In your example, they're using you, Lance, like an actual but I will say, like, we should talk more about stuff I've actually written. But I'm happy to defend the Atlantic decisions on this week. Yeah,
I can move on then. So I wanted to talk about the newer studies that have come out, because you said you've
Fine, I will Google the photo shoot. Jesse Singal, what is it? Jesse Singal detransition article?
not heard of any studies that actually show that, the rates of, children who actually desist are low. This is something
Sorry, are we talking desistance or detransition?
Well, we can talk about both. We can talk about satisfaction rates for children who transition, and at which point how they feel and how much satisfaction they have, and how many of them actually choose to detransition. But this is something in which the overwhelming amount of data that has come out internationally from study after study on this topic shows very, very, very.
Which study? Don't. Okay, we've talked about this earlier. The Lazy Gardener and Decorative Scholarship. Which study and what do they say? If you're going to refer to things without understanding them, but then when challenged, you don't want to get into the weeds, then you are guilty of the Lazy Gardener. So, Lance, are you going to tell us which studies and what they say?
Very low rates of detransitioning, to the point where for someone to infer that they could be high or low, like, this is, again, not my area of expertise. This is something that you've written way more about than I have. But, have you pulled up the levels of satisfaction and regret after gender affirming care in adolescence? 2024 U.S. study, which showed 97% continued access to gender affirming care, and their satisfaction rate was 6.5 out of 7 on an average of 6 to 10 years after transition.
Sure. So the problem here is there's also a study based on like U.S. military healthcare records where I forget the exact number. I'll include links to all these studies in our show notes. 25% had discontinued a few years later. And Kinnan McKinnon's point, this is this researcher who studies this stuff, is that depending on how you ask the question, you get a lot of different answers. And a lot of the studies saying a 1 or 2 or 3% regret rate only count kids who come back to the clinic and say, I transitioned, here I am. And that's, if a lot of them don't come back because they feel like they were burned by clinics that didn't give them good care. So I used to say, I cited this statistic that the desistance rate, not detransition, desistance is 80%. I no longer use that because I think there's a lot of fuzziness here. I just feel the same way about the detransition research. I think there's an article I'll include a link to, and this is just one person's opinion. It is a peer-reviewed article. The detransition rate is unknown. The author is Cohn, Archives of Sexual Behavior. That's my view, is the detransition rate is unknown. Because if I have 100 patients who come through my clinic, and 2 years later, I reach out to them and I get in touch with 50 of them, and they're all happy. That's not a 0% detransition rate. It's an I don't know detransition rate because I've lost track of 50 of them, or 50% of them. Do you get what I'm saying? Like, if you don't know what happened,
I get what you're saying, but you immediately just took a peer-reviewed study that I was referencing, and this is a recent one. This one was from 2024 and discounted it just out of the gates and said, yeah, the truth is.
And told you why he discounted it. I am going to get increasingly pissed off as we continue to watch this. So the points, in case you're not tracking them, in case, like, Lance has hurt you psychically so much that you're no longer able to absorb new information. Jesse Singal's point is that when he's looked at the study's methodology, whenever they report a 97% satisfaction rate, those are only people who continue to show up to the clinic. However, there is a large population that stops showing up to the clinic and stops reporting about what's going on. And a lot of the detransitioners that he talked to didn't continue working with the clinic because they felt like they got burned by the clinic. So he's saying that the detransition rate is unknown. So we know there's 3%. We don't know if it's higher than that because of the people who stopped communicating with the clinics. Then desistance, he said he used to quote that desistance was as high as 88%. And that's because people can experience gender dysphoria at various times in life, most likely concentrated around puberty. Okay. And desistance and detransition is not the same. Gender dysphoria desistance means that you feel weird about your body and you wonder whether or not you would be better off in a different trans identity as a result of your gender dysphoria. And then your gender dysphoria alleviates so you don't transition. That's desistance. Whereas detransition is you fully transition to a different identity, and then later on, you're just like, oh, fuck, this was a mistake. So if we're going with a raw gender affirming model, then you might get people who would otherwise desist, but you basically affirm them into transitioning. And that is the exact anxiety that Jesse Singal is bringing up and is saying is a valid anxiety to have based off of the lack of good information. I'm gonna check in with chat because these people are pissing me off and I might have a stroke. Bull Media says children transitioning sounds so very wrong down the core of my being. It's like saying successful lobotomy. Bull Media, I'm just going to give you the steel man. So the steel man is that if you have persistent gender dysphoria for a long time since childhood, then especially when it comes to males transitioning to women, the earlier the transition, like if you do it during adolescence, the more likely you are to have like a successful transition. Whereas with if you allow somebody to go through a male puberty first, then they're going to take on a bunch of male secondary sex characteristics. And so as a result, the transition is not going to be as successful. So I'm trying to think. There's this girl, and I say girl, she was born male. Blair White, happy trans person interview. There's this girl that I'm trying to think if it's here. So Blair White is obviously like, you know, the conservative pick me when it comes to trans people, right? And if you go up to the top, there's Lily Tino, who I don't care who you are. Lily Tino is a piece of shit. Okay. Lily Tino is total psycho nut job. There's Dylan Mulvaney, who I would say is a weirdo, but you're allowed to be weird in the United States of America. Who cares? Then there's this girl who detransitioned. She went male trans, realized it was wrong, and then detransitioned. And then realistically, for Blair, it was almost simultaneously. There was an interview with a total passoid who transitioned when she was like 14 or 15. I'm actually going to scroll back to 5 years and see what's up and see if I can spot her real quick. But there was this girl who transitioned at 13 or 14. And she was like, yeah, I'm happy. I'm trans. I have a straight boyfriend right now. I'm living my best life, blah, blah, blah. But she transitioned when she was like 13 or 14. And the surgeries went good. And she had plenty of money for surgery. And she obviously has like rich, progressive parents. I'm looking to see if I can just spot her through a scroll. I don't know if I'm going to be able to. But it was an interview, and you would not be able to recognize this girl as trans because she transitioned so early. I don't think I'm going to be able to spot her. I'll check the live section real quick. But the point is that this, like, there are people who transition and they're total passoids. Anyways. Who is JBP? Jordan Peterson. General So says, I find it hard to believe that a 13-year-old even would be able to sign a modeling release form. Well, she was 22. She just looked young. We pulled her up earlier. She just looks young. Imagine, or I guess it's a he, him now. So he looked young. Randy Chang says, imagine what life must be like in 2025 for a non-political trans person. Everyone wants to use you as a lever. Yep. That dude is a cutie for real, for real. Yep. Jonah Zola says, has JBP ever had a combo with JBP? That'd be pretty funny. I think, yeah, there's Jordan Peterson versus Jordan Peterson clips. They're awesome. Hey, Connor, Lance can't hear you. Yeah, I wish he could because he's a fucking idiot. All right. Anyways, I guess back to it.
Is that, hey, by the way, there's another study that shows, you know, if we interview military personnel, that this is just not the case. That's one of, again, many studies that you can pull up. There's re-identification.
No, KO Day brings up a good point. I may be strawmanning here. A big hypocrisy I see sometimes is the idea that gender is a social construct, but somehow a trans person can't be trans because of social pressure. I would say that most progressives will just like, they might acknowledge that social pressure could be a thing, but they think that that is used as cover for bigotry against trans people. I think any sane progressive would admit that, but Lance can't be sane because he's a progressive on the internet. So he has to say the craziest, most fucked up, dumb position possible.
With birth registered sex in Western Australian pediatric gender clinic cohort. This was an Australian study of 552 patients.
LB says kids. I thought he said a military study. Yes, the Department of Defense has healthcare that's for the families of military people. Military people have families.
They showed 1% of trans youth re-identified with their sex assigned at birth, 4% re-identified during mental health assessments period or earlier did not proceed with gender-affirming care. There's also a more nuanced story. The pediatric gender-affirming healthcare is associated with satisfaction and confidence from 2024. This one, once again, 88% expressed satisfaction, 86.7% felt confident, out of 141 on hormones. Only one person, sorry, I want to finish saying this because I think it's important for your audience. Only one person, 0.7%, regretted both hormone therapy and.
Did this somehow debunk what Jesse said, or are you just repeating the stats because you don't understand what words mean?
Surgery. Now, for longitudinal studies, which is something that I know you've often asked about as well, there's the gender identity 5 years.
Whatever 4690 says, is Trump wrong for making trans people go to prisons of their born sex? If they're in isolation, I don't care. So, whatever 4690, obviously prison is a hellhole, and homosexual rape in prison, they call it like institutionalized homosexuality. It's very normal in prison, allegedly, for rape to be used as a tool of power and sexual gratification, et cetera, et cetera. And so the fear is that if trans people are put in Gen Pop, like if male trans people who are intact and have penises and who don't modify their testosterone and maybe they're accused of sex crimes, that they might abuse female inmates. And then it's also worrisome for male trans people to be put into male prison because then they're obviously going to be, if they're feminine, they're probably going to be disproportionately targeted for rape, right? So the fear is that you're not protecting these populations. You're basically exposing them both to rape. So what I would say is, if there was a trans person who had genital reassignment surgery, who had FFS and was on estrogen and had reliable access to estrogen and had estrogen levels in line with normal, in line with the female population, then I would say, who gives a shit, send them in there. If they're intact, they're not on hormones, and they just identify as a woman or whatever, then I would say put them in some kind of like segregation unit. And same thing with female trans men who might get like raped. Wait, hold on. Female trans men would be in the women's pod. I'm not too worried about them. The males in the female pen, you might need to segregate. And then sorry, I'm getting lost. Males in the, do you know what I'm saying? No, I'm totally fucking it up. Pause, reset. Everybody reset your brains. I'm insufficiently caffeinated, I'm tired, and Lance is giving me fucking headaches. So if you take an assigned female at birth man and you put them in the female pod, I think they'll be okay because they don't have a penis, they can't impregnate people, and let's face it, they have the same physical capacities as a butch lesbian. So I don't think that a man who was assigned female at birth is going to be that big of a problem in the women's prison. When it comes to somebody with a penis, an assigned male at birth trans person being sent into the male pod, I think the worry is that they're going to be disproportionately targeted for rape. So if any problems manifest, then there should be another pod for segregation where basically if somebody is disproportionately likely to be a perpetrator or victim of sex abuse, they should be segregated and they should be controlled in such a way that that sex abuse doesn't occur. I think the sentences I just said were approximately in English, and I think they made sense.
After social transition, this one was 2022 in the US, which included 317 youth, 208 trans girls, 109 trans boys, and I think this is one of the ones that you personally critiqued, but 94% maintained their gender identity without regret.
BizD says, who said they felt it since childhood? There are people who experience gender dysphoria since childhood.
Without regret, 3.5 became non-binary, and only 2.5 reverted back to being cis. And of all these studies, the reason that is often given for people who do detransition.
Sorry. Bull Media says, Connor, I appreciate the steel man, but nobody knows what the fuck gender is, trans means anymore. Your two boys would be trans if you caught them watching Sailor Moon or any girl shit. No, because I'm not dumb. So when my kids, you know what's funny? My boys do some feminine things, but what's so funny about it is they do it and then they immediately do a masculine thing. So for instance, my boys are disproportionately sweet. They're very nice. They're very temperamentally nice, and they will cuddle baby dolls. And my mom will be, or not my mom and my wife will be like, oh, that's so sweet. And I think if I was a giga progressive, maybe I'd be like, oh man, maybe they're trans. Maybe I could get brownie points, right? But then what my sons will do when they were babies is immediately after hugging the baby doll, they will use the baby doll as a hammer to smash another toy in a direction that they want to go. So they'll be like, boom. Like, you know the meme, hit a motherfucker with another motherfucker? You ever seen that? Hit a mother with another mother. So my kids will cuddle a baby doll and then they'll do this meme. So I think we're good, to be honest. I don't think my kids are trans.
Or even in desistance cases is social stigma, the social stigma that's applied to this. Now, I think one of the
I actually need to half listen to the content while I continue to read chat.
Problems you have when people want to go back and forth on the data, and even if it's someone like me who wants to, exclusively refer to peer-reviewed studies only, is that you can look at meta-analysis of the studies. You can look at, pooling of the studies, right? Like there's the regret after gender affirmation study, the systematic review. That one analyzes 27 studies.
You mean the one in the journal of, sorry, it analyzed how many?
This one analyzes 27 studies, pooling 7,000.
Sorry, chat keeps being interesting again, so they keep interrupting the content. Stop being interesting, chat. So Blair White has fully transitioned, and you say, shouldn't we just give them therapy so they don't want to be trans anymore? I don't think I give a shit. If Blair White is happy as a woman, and she transitioned and got FFS, and she's happy, I don't give a fuck. Same thing with Taftaj. I hope she doesn't mind me using her. I'm friends with Taftaj. So if Taftaj, to my knowledge, was born male. Like this is Taftaj before, but she has been on estrogen for a really long time. And I think she's had gender affirming surgeries. And so if Taftaj is happy being a fucking woman, guess what? I don't give a shit. God bless her. Go live your fucking best life. Okay? I really don't care. Okay, so sorry.
928 trans patients internationally, and
yeah, so
that study, the majority of them are on adults.
Hey, I feel bad, but I'm not like the talking over me. let me just, because I'm very familiar with these studies. So the one you just mentioned,
Sure.
They doubled their sample size through an error. Their sample size was 50% high. Let me pull up the actual. This is Bustos et al., right?
Hold on.
Yeah, regret after gender affirmation surgery, a systematic review of meta-analysis of prevalence.
Yes, it's Bustos.
This was a study, I've written about it.
Sure.
I forget the exact, they basically doubled their sample size because they did not correctly transfer the data from the studies they were looking at into their meta-analysis. And to this day, there's this team, I think it's one psychiatrist in Australia and a few researchers in London or thereabouts who've been trying to get them to correct the numerous errors with it. Now, even if I've written about this study in particular, even if you accepted their claims at face value, the overall loss to follow-up rate was 40%. So there's two things here. If this was a great meta-analysis, we would still not know what happened to 40% of the participants, but they just won't correct their errors. There's sort of a long paper trail. And unfortunately, I found this, like, before I got into the gender stuff, I wrote a whole book about other sort of popular science ideas where there was very little accountability and researchers don't correct their errors. And it's just, science is in a bad place right now. It isn't just youth gender medicine, but I would just make 2 points. One of which is this is the single most viral study on the regret question, despite having all sorts of uncorrected errors. And if the overall loss to follow-up rate is 40%, that means you don't know. So the Australian study you just mentioned, you probably don't know. I don't think what's the loss to follow-up rate? Do you know that?
No.
Is this the one in which, so there's
This
a
is the one
difference
you brought
between
up from the Australian clinic.
Yeah. So in that case, when you're saying there's a loss of 40% of the people who return to ask the questions, right? That doesn't mean that you can classify them as desisters or detransitioners.
He's not saying that. He's saying that the data is bad. We're still arguing about this. I've been paying attention more to chat, so I didn't realize we were still arguing about this. That's Jesse's point, dumbass.
Or
No. What I'm saying is, if you right, loss to follow up just means you don't know. I don't know, like, how many of them detransitioned or desisted. But the point is, if you've lost 40% of your sample, and I don't, in the Australian one you brought up as a 2024 one, do you know what the loss to follow up rate in that one is?
Of course he doesn't, because Lance doesn't know how to read.
No, I don't have the data.
Okay.
So you don't know either, Lance.
And so again, this is like,
You're talking about the 2024 re-identification with birth registered sex in Western Australian pediatric gender clinic cohort.
It's the one you mentioned as an example of how.
Yeah,
low
the one
rate
that you're
is.
invoking that I invoked, that would be the one from 2024. So
Okay.
I
would just say it's probably.
Regardless of whether or not he knows the specific study, if you don't know that data point, then he still has a point, Lance. You muppet.
Probably important to know what the loss to follow-up rate is. Now, I think the Dutch have probably done the best job. They have a couple of studies where people who go through this pretty intensive diagnostic process where, like, I think trans activists think it's too harsh, but it's like if you have a lot of other mental health comorbidities, they don't let you transition. I think they've done a couple studies where, like, loss to follow-up isn't too high. And if you go through this strict process, yeah, the outcomes appear to be pretty good. But I don't know how things are going in Canada. In the US, we have a totally different protocol where a lot of clinics are not doing a lot of gatekeeping. And I guess that's what worries me, because I don't think there would be much of a story here if, like, in every case of a young person getting hormones or surgeries or blockers, there'd been an extensive assessment period. But we know from Reuters reporting, from a little bit of my reporting, that's not the norm. So that's what I'm worried about. And that's why I think, like, it's important to dig into these regret studies and say, if you have kids coming through your clinic and you're giving them major medical treatments and then 40% of them disappear, and I'm 40%, it's usually lower than that, but 30%, and you can't follow up with them, how can you say it's a successful treatment or that they're happy? You don't know that. So that's why I say the detransition rate, in my view, is unknown. I would not say it's super high, which some gender critical activists do, just because, like, the detransition subreddit is getting bigger. That doesn't tell us it's high. I have no confidence it's low, because every time I've looked at a study that seems to say it's low, it has what to me are pretty major problems.
So speaking about the United States, again, yeah, I think you are very...
Okay. I'm desperately going to try to pay attention to see if Lance has absorbed any of this information and is moving to a new point. If he's not moving to a new point, I will fast forward him. As far as I know, I've been in like a 10 to 20 minute haze where I've been half paying attention to the content and I've been arguing with chat. And effectively what's been happening for the past 10 to 20 minutes is that Jesse Singal has said, I don't know what the desistance rate is allegedly as high as 80%, but I don't know that for a fact. So that's something we should consider when we're talking about gender affirming care. And in reference to detransition, we just don't know because half of trans people just stop showing up to clinics and stop answering their phone. So until we have better data, we just don't know. And Lance is saying, yeah, but did you know that it was as low as 2 or 3%? And then Jesse is saying, you don't know that it's as low as 2 or 3% because half of people stopped showing up. If they circle the wagons one more time, I'm going to fast forward them 10 minutes.
Good at pulling apart, the small specific.
Sorry. And then Tagarung says, I think if I think I'm a worm, removing my arms and legs early in life is affirming care that limits my exposure to the fact that I'm a primate. So what Vlad Darius Serbin says is that Tagarung, from the limited research I've read, seems like gender affirming care to alleviate some of the dysphoria, but the research is limited until better ones seem like a decent thing right now. Vlad is saying the Jesse Singal point, but AF Racing has an even better point, which is said that Tagarung, we would love you even if you were a worm.
These bards about individual studies and going back and forth. Have you mentioned that conclusively every major medical association in the United States agrees upon gender affirming care, that it's a valid form of health care, and that it should be acceptable for doctors to use? And the same applies to Canada. Every major medical association in Canada strongly supports gender affirming care, including access to puberty blockers and hormones.
Well, I mean, first of all, that's not true because the American Academy of Pediatrics is doing a new systematic review.
It's 100% true.
What do you...
No, it's not. If he just said that a major medical organization that actually is oh, fuck you, Lance.
I'm sorry. The American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Medical Association, the American Psychiatric Association, the American Psychological Association, the Endocrine Society, Pediatric Endocrine Society, American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, the National Association of Social Workers, and American College of
and watch Jesse Singal make the exact same point when Lance is done talking about it.
Obstetricians and gynecologists. They all have statements that are still available on their websites. Now, that could change, as you're suggesting right now. The American Academy of Pediatrics could change their stance on that. But as of right now, every major medical association in the United States agrees and strongly supports gender affirming care.
They don't strongly support it. So they all use different language. Some of them will say, like, in the case of well-assessed youth or something like that. In the case of the AAP, they put out a 2018 policy statement where this one guy, Jason Rafferty, he wrote it. And usually when you have a statement from a medical group, you want it to be like the statement of the whole group, right? Not just one guy or like a committee. So this was an unusual case where one guy wrote it. It says at the bottom, this is his responsibility and his responsibility alone. And it's a strange statement that I think has a lot of inaccuracies. Now, I know that in your world, the CAS review has been debunked, which I just think is wrong. I've written about that. The CAS review, one of the useful things it did was look at the existing standards put out by these groups. And it basically just showed that there's not a good scientific process underlying these statements. And I think in some cases, there's a case to be made that there's been political pressure. In the case of WPATH, we know from documents that fell out of these court cases that there was political pressure. So I think you're too trusting of the medical establishment because, like, they're not purely scientific groups. Like, some of the American Medical Association and groups like it have been against Medicare for all. They've been in favor of these ridiculous laws that make it hard for, like, Indian doctors to come over here and practice. So they're not right about everything. Like, I'm guessing you are for Medicare for all, right?
I think you changed the topic like 3 times in one sentence.
No, he didn't, you fucking idiot. Sorry. Like, re-summarizing Jesse Singal, this is the difference between being bad faith and being genuinely stupid, okay? Lance thinks that Jesse Singal has brought up 3 points because he's being bad faith. But what Jesse Singal brought up is actually a direct response to what Lance said. He said that, like, Lance made a statement. And that statement was, the vast majority of psychological and endocrinological and medical associations endorse gender-affirming care. And what Jesse Singal said, well, actually, if you look at the verbiage that these medical associations use, they're not flat out endorsing gender-affirming care. They have caveats within their statements, like they say, in well-assessed youth. And well-assessed is not established. We don't know what well-assessed means, okay? So we need to argue about what well-assessed means. Is it 2 years? Is it 6 months? Is it one consultation? We need to argue about what well-assessed means. That was his number one point. Number two, he was saying that one of the major organizations that is often cited in reference to this research is reassessing the protocol. So since 2018, they have gone back and said, hey, we actually don't have a lot of good information in reference to this, so we're going to start from scratch. That's also what I heard happened with the CAS review in the United Kingdom, is that the National Health Service, whatever their universal healthcare system is, basically said that, like, we're starting from scratch in reference to gender care for teenagers, right? And kids. So those are two major medical organizations who have backtracked from the position that Lance is saying is settled science, quote unquote. Then on top of that, he said, hey, surely you don't trust every medical association about every single topic, because as an example, here's a medical association that you're currently citing that's doing weirdly political shit in reference to two topics. And you agree with my position on these two topics. So clearly you don't trust this medical association at all times. Lance is literally too stupid. I'm not even fully paying attention. And I understand what Jesse said more than Lance. LB makes another claim that I have to verify. How common is sexual assault in women's prison? How common is sexual assault? A study discussed by the National Institute of Health found that the rates of inmate sexual victimization were highest for female inmates, 212 per 100,000, more than 4 times higher than for male inmates, 43 per 100,000. So, LB, you're fucking wrong again. Please stop pissing me off. And that's because women are not doing penetrative sex, but they're still sexually assaulting each other. Probably with fingers, right? So more women are being grabbed in their crotch area than men are being assaulted in prison. However, with men, there's probably the shame of sexual stigma, and it's also penetrative sex. And I'm just going to tell you, if somebody tries to do penetrative sex to me, I'm going to fucking snap that thing off like a celery stalk and throw it into tall grass. All right? So again, wrong.
I think you're trying to just deviate away from the fact that every single
No,
medical association in the United States agrees upon this. You can start to poke holes in that by saying that their statement isn't as strong as you feel it is, but that is just a universal fact right now, as of our recording, that every single major medical association in the United States agrees upon this. Now, if you want to talk about the CAS, if you want to talk about the CAS review, we can eventually get to that, because again, I want to talk about this in terms of, like, I'm not an expert on this. I'm not a scientist, right? Yeah. So I have to actually.
And Jesse has done more research than you, so you're getting mogged, even though I'm sure your chat loves you.
You look this stuff up, but this is universal as well within Canada. If you're not aware, the Canadian Pediatric Society, the Canadian Medical Association, the Canadian Psychological Association, and the Canadian Psychiatric Association all agree that, again,
and this isn't addressing the points being made. I swear to God. Smooth brain meme times. Holy shit. This is Lance. Bumpy, weird, gross, wrinkles, ugly, thinks equals sad. My brain, smooth, no wrinkles, cute, can't think equals no sad. Insult me all you wish. My brain is too smooth. The smoothest there is. Your words simply slide right off. Now, here's the problem, though, is that information slides right off of Lance's brain. Here's Jesse Singal's point. It smacks the front of Lance's forehead, and then it just gently slides right off. I'm going to give Lance like another 5 to 10 minutes in order to like try to absorb some information. And then I think we're moving to the next segment, because this is pissing me off. I'm not going to lie.
Support gender affirming care, including the use of puberty blockers and hormones.
I'm going to listen to Jesse Singal reiterate his argument and Lance ignore it.
For youth. That's the
When
totality of the major medical associations that would determine whether or not this should be safe for children to do.
So let's stick to the Canadian ones, which you're probably more familiar with. When you say they support it, do they support it like an informed consent model or lengthy assessment? What exactly are they in favor of?
Guess what? Lance is not going to know.
So I wrote down a little paragraph on each one of their endorsements. So the Canadian Pediatric Society recommends gender-affirming care, including puberty blockers and hormone therapy, under informed consent models. The Canadian Medical Association endorses access to gender-affirming care and opposes bans for political interference. The Canadian Psychological Association supports affirming care and mental health support for trans youth. And the Canadian Psychiatric Association affirms that gender-affirming care is evidence-based and medically appropriate.
So the first one you mentioned, is that informed consent for young people or for adults?
Consent model.
For who? Adults or young people?
Both.
Both. Okay. So that means like if a 13-year-old comes into a clinic and wants hormones, they should just get hormones.
No, not at all.
If they sign the consent, if they sign the consent form.
You've spoken about the DSM-5 before, right? You're aware of how the system itself works.
No, informed consent. The whole point of informed consent is there's not gatekeeping. That's what informed consent is. If you're told the risks and benefits of this treatment, you can consent to it. You can fill out a form.
Right. But in the case of you
just watch the information just slide right over his smooth brain. Just watch it.
saying that like you could just walk into a door and walk out with puberty blockers, that's not how someone would be diagnosed with gender dysphoria.
But under the informed consent model, it doesn't matter what their diagnosis is. The point is informed consent.
Absolutely, it does. Sorry, how do you think the DSM-5 works? Do you think that people simply walk into the clinic?
I love how he's laughing smugly when Jesse Singal obviously understands more.
And they say, I like girls, but I want to dress up like a boy. And then they're like, okay, here's hormones.
Do you know what informed consent means?
But now you're backtracking. Again, this
well, just tell me, yes or no. Do you know what informed consent means?
Jesse, specific.
Answer the question, yes or no. If you don't answer the question, yes or no, you're being viewed as evasive and a fucking worm. We've talked about worms earlier in this content. Lance is a fucking worm.
Okay. When it comes to how they actually walk into these clinics that are treated, neither of us are doctors, right?
Yeah, but Jesse has been you don't need to be a doctor in order to research different medical models, you fucking idiot. I'm sorry I'm getting pissed off. I'm sorry I'm getting profane, but this is actually like I'm reaching my limit of stupidity that I can absorb from Lance. So I'm going to go ahead and let this back and forth play out, and then I'm going to wrap and move to the next segment.
So in what world does that work?
Do you know what informed consent means? Because this is important to the point I'm trying to make.
We've already defined informed consent.
What does it mean?
Recommends gender-affirming care, including puberty blockers and hormones therapy, under the informed consent models.
Okay. So what is the informed consent model, you smooth-brained worm?
You're Googling informed consent model. What do you find?
No, I'm opening up their website because I want to get to it.
Okay. You don't know, dude. Just say it's. You're not.
In 60 years,
you know a lot of.
Sorry, go ahead.
I think you don't know what informed consent means, and that's causing a roadblock in the conversation. Under an informed consent model for youth, if that's what this group supports, a 13-year-old, if they're informed of the costs of the potential harms and benefits of the treatment, a 13-year-old can go on hormones right away. That's what informed consent means in the context of transgender healthcare.
No, they would still.
And it could be you're in favor of that.
They would still need. No, Jesse, they would still need to actually be determined. Sorry, a doctor would still need to be determining whether or not that individual actually, in fact, has the 5 of the 7.
No, that's gatekeeping. The whole point of informed consent is it was a response to gatekeeping, because for decades, trans adults felt like doctors were poking and prodding them and asking personal questions. Informed consent was an alternative to that, where the doctor says, here's what the hormones will do. Here are the potential downsides. Right. Sign this form and we'll give them to you. So that's why informed consent clinics are so popular, including at some of our Planned Parenthoods in the States.
But then what I don't understand what your problem is with that then.
With a third.
Sorry. Lance just actually within 20 seconds did the "that's not happening, it's good it's happening" meme. Within 20 seconds. Okay. Let's just finish up this exchange. Don't have a stroke. Don't have a stroke. Don't have a stroke. Don't have a stroke.
13-year-old being able to walk in and get hormones?
But they wouldn't be able to. Under informed consent models.
If under
Okay, he actually just doesn't understand. He actually just doesn't understand words. I knew this content. I knew this content was going to be dog shit from the perspective of actually understanding complex ideas. I knew it was going to be fire from the perspective that Lance is a fucking idiot, and therefore he's just going to get mogged for the entire time that I'm watching it. So Vinny says 23 minutes in, and Jesse is an insufferable grifter who is absolutely unwilling to listen or concede to anything. Peter Peel pays them damn good. Bruh. These people, anybody who thinks that Lance did well, I'm sorry to tell you, but you got 80 IQ. So, sorry. Let's go ahead and do a nice little closer on that, and then let's move into the next piece of content. So anyways, as predicted, Lance from the Serfs is incapable of receiving new information. He is only capable of constantly reciting the information that he read aggressively. Jesse Singal, this is the lazy gardener. Jesse Singal followed up with him in various questions, and I'm just going to cite to you the most recent example. Do you know what informed consent is? Lance did not know, but acted incredulous when Jesse Singal described the process to him. Then, once he agreed that that was the process that 13-year-olds were under, where they don't need a diagnosis because previously they had been gatekept from meds, so informed consent is an alternative model. Somebody who does not have a diagnosis, who does not have a psychiatrist 2 years of evaluation, who doesn't have to do any kind of gatekeeping, can walk in and say, yes, I know the risks, therefore I'm going to engage in the treatment. And within 15 seconds, Lance went from, that's not how this works, to, why do you care that this is how it works? He's actually too stupid to be a political commentator. I'm going to engage with chat and move into the next segment. That was very psychologically painful. Vlad Darius Serban says, I feel like Lance can teach me how to play lacrosse, and I really think he should go to his true calling and stop debating. Agreed. He probably would be able to teach us more about sports than he would about thinking. Bud123 says, I wake up to this mental damage. I need to go back to bed. Lol. Yeah, it was pretty rough. True Zelt for $10. Thank you for your super chat. King says, I already lost your PayPal link, but watching the progressives in this chat have their face rubbed into reality like a non-housebroken dog makes supporting you on this channel worth it. God bless. Thank you, King. I appreciate you. Speaking of which, I'm going to generate a PayPal link for the next segment. I'm sorry that I forgot to generate it. Scrolling, looking for anybody who does at Connor in chat. The facts just hit that sharp jaw of his and shatter. True. Worms is an excellent video game. True. Hedonic Treadmill says, but did you consider that Jesse Singal if a transphobic meanie pants, though? I did consider that. Now Jesse is being dishonest. Being dishonest about what? You know, what was he dishonest about? Please tell me. Yeah. Please. Tagrung says, as a compromise, I'm down with transing a couple hundred kids a year if the Dems will go with the abundance formula. It's a sacrifice I'm willing. Some of you may die, but it's a sacrifice I'm willing to make. LB says, you do need to be a doctor to understand how treatment works, Connor, not just read a study. LB, you're pissing me off today. As always. You don't need to be a doctor to understand the informed consent model. That's what Jesse Singal was saying. So normally, what you do is you do a diagnosis. I go to the doctor and I don't tell him the disease I have. I tell him the symptoms I have. I say, doctor, whenever I listen to Lance from the Serfs, I get a fucking tension headache. My blood pressure spikes. My heart starts beating out of my chest, and I feel like I'm on the verge of having a cardiovascular incident. And he says, Connor, there's nothing physically actually wrong with you. You just need to stop drinking caffeine and watching content that infuriates you. However, if your blood pressure is still high when you're not watching Lance from the Serfs, you might have hypertension, and you're going to need to change your diet, and you're going to need to do more cardiovascular activity. Okay? That's what a doctor would do under the diagnosis model. Now, what could happen under the informed consent model is I could walk in and I could say, doctor, when I watch Lance from the Serfs, my blood pressure spikes and I feel like I'm going to fucking die. and have a heart attack and I get heart palpitations and I want to throw up. And he said, instead of double checking whether or not I have hypertension, he says, here's some hypertension meds. These are the potential side effects. If you sign this paperwork, you can have access to the hypertension meds. That's the informed consent model. I understood it in 30 seconds of Jesse Singal explaining it. Philip Coffey says, Connor, feeling awake now? Yeah, but I also feel like sick. Sen660 says, he must be lying. No one is that stupid. No, I think he actually is that stupid. LB says, are you talking about adults having informed consent on children? Well, I don't know what the informed consent... So the informed consent model could be in conjunction with parental informed consent because they're under the age of majority. However, I don't know. I'm not a communist, so I'm not Canadian. Lance is living embodiment of Patrick and not in my wallet meme. Yep. Short Stack Goblin says, Connor, nice lavender form wallpapers, very feminine. Is it Southern France? No idea. I think it's Canada. Tagrung says, hey, Doc, I got the bad ideation from listening to the Serfs. What can you do for me? And then they put you on anti-anxiety and anti-depression meds. All right. Bud123 says, it's been just over a month. I've been going to the gym consistently. So if I give it 5 to 6 months, I should gain more weight. Yeah. But you also have to eat a fuckload. So Bud123, you're trying to gain weight. Are you naturally skinny? If you're trying to gain weight, you have to eat a shitload. I was, what do you call it? I was, ectomorphic. I know ectomorph, endomorph, whatever. It's not scientific, but I still think there's an element of truth to it. And it's the way that your body is built and also processes fat. I was ectomorphic probably until I was like 25, 26, where I was very skinny and it was very difficult for me to put on and keep weight. And so if you're ectomorphic, where you're skinny and it's hard for you to keep weight, then you just have to eat a shitload. I'm not kidding. There was a part of my life where I was eating 250 grams of protein per day, and I was consuming 6,000 calories per day total. It was actually pretty hardcore. When I was 19, that's what I was doing. So Cameron Mosley says, why would anyone be a communist in the modern day unless they don't know any better? Because we're just here to suffer. Bud123 says, yes, I'm naturally skinny fat. I want to gain muscle, so I need to eat more steaks and chicken. Well, if you're skinny fat, where if you're skinny, but then you have a little bit of a belly, then the good news is that, yes, lifting weight, it should redistribute your fat percentage, and it should redistribute your muscle, and your body should move some things around in order to accommodate the new load. So, yeah. Anyways, let's set up the next one. And let's get into that content, because the good news is you guys still get to watch me potentially stroke out on stream, but we're actually going to be dealing with smart people. So I think I put in that I was going to watch the Destiny versus JVP content. And truth be told, I should have watched that a long time ago. I know it's old, but it should be gold. They're relatively smart men. You guys know that I have a affinity for Jordan Peterson, even when he's being all mythological and wonky. So yeah, let's psychically suffer together.
I'm pleased to announce my.
Let me pull it up. Let me do an intro. Canada has farms. I thought they just tackled moose for meat. Agreed. All right, quick shill time. Like the stream. Liking the stream is free. Watch the VODs. Watching the VODs is also free, but it gives me that sweet, sweet AdSense revenue. If you have a super chat that you want to do, it's appreciated. Never required, always appreciated. If you want to gift memberships, it's appreciated. Never required. Engage in chat. There's lots of funny, interesting, cool people in there. And then comment on the VODs. That way they boost them in the algorithm. Let's go ahead and do an intro. Hi guys, my name's Connor. I'm a science fiction, political, and philosophy nerd, a Marine Corps and law enforcement veteran, and a Never Trump Republican. We are going to be breaking down the content between my internet dad and my internet brother. My internet dad is Jordan B. Peterson. My internet brother is Destiny, Stephen Bennell. And so Stephen is quite smart, quite intellectually gifted, quite good at debate. Jordan Peterson is a mythological Jungian psychologist, dream soothsayer shaman. And so a debate between the schizotypal mythological shaman versus a rationalist debate bro should be fire. So let's go ahead and bring our contenders on stage, and I'll be pausing intermittently to break them down.
New tour for 2024, beginning in early February and running through June. Tammy and I, an assortment of special.
Fast forwarding past the commercial.
When you look at like the fall of the Soviet Union, or you look at the failure of like socialist or communist regimes, I don't know if the issue there was so much redistribution.
That was one of many issues.
I don't think it was an issue at all, actually.
What do you mean redistribution wasn't an issue? What the hell do you think they did to the kulaks?
If you believe climate models, or if you believe that we're heading in a certain direction.
I don't believe any of those presumptions.
People keep saying that, but we just got another one of the hottest years on record.
That's a classic leftist argument.
Why wouldn't Putin, why wouldn't Xi Jinping, why wouldn't anybody else in the world call this out? It was as horrible as it was.
There are plenty of people attempting to call
Nobody
out that.
credible.
You really think that you're in a position to evaluate the scientific credibility of the trials for the vaccines, do you?
Oh, no. No. This is going to be like Thanksgiving all over again. Fuck.
Hello, everyone. I'm here today talking to Stephen Bunnell, known professionally and online as Destiny. He's an American streamer, debater, and political commentator. He really came to my attention, I would say, as a consequence of the discussion he had with Ben Shapiro and Lex Friedman. And I decided to talk to him, not least because it's not that easy to bring people who are identified, at least to some degree, with the political beliefs on the left into a studio where I can actually have a conversation with them.
Holy shit, I need a grift as a liberal. If this was actually true, where Jordan Peterson and Daily Wire people are having problems finding intellectual, quote-unquote, liberals and lefties to talk to, holy fucking shit. I need to dye my hair blue, and I need to trans my dogs. Oh, fuck. All right, anyways.
I've tried that more often than you might think, and it happens now and then, but not very often. So today we talk a lot about, well, the differences between the left and the right, and the dangers of political ideology per se, and the use of power as opposed to invitation, and all sorts of other often heated and contentious issues. And so you're welcome to join us. And I was happy to have the opportunity to do this. So I guess we might as well start by letting the people who don't know who you are get to know who you are with a little bit more precision. So why have you become known, and how has that developed?
It's a pretty broad question. I think I started streaming around 15 years ago when it wasn't really a thing yet. There were a few people that did it. I started early on. I guess back then you weren't a professional gamer yet because the game had just started to come out, but there was a game called StarCraft 2, and I streamed myself playing that game. I was a pretty good player. It was pretty entertaining to watch. And then I kind of grew over, I guess, maybe the next 7 years, just streaming that people would watch.
Streaming on YouTube?
Well, back then, I started on a website called Livestream. Then I switched to Ustream. Then I switched to a site called Justin TV. And then that turned into Twitch.tv. So after streaming there for like 7 or 8 years, I was a semi-professional StarCraft 2 gamer. That game kind of came and went, but I had a lot of other interests. Around 2016, I started to get more involved into the world of politics. It's kind of a left-leaning figure because of my background in like esports and internet gaming and internet trash talk. I had more of a kind of like a combative attitude, and that was kind of rare for left-leaning people at the time. So it's basically where my early political popularity came from. I think from like 2016 to 2018 was debating right-wing people.
So was there a game-like element to the debating, do you think? And is that part of why that morphing made sense?
I love my dad. I love my real dad, but I also love Jordan Peterson dad. You understand that this is actually a pretty insightful question to almost instantaneously pick up on? Do you understand that this might actually speak to the core of Destiny's identity? Like, so what I've noticed, and I'm not trying to be like too parasocial, But Steven, when we went shooting together in South Florida, he was getting frustrated that he wasn't able to master the shotgun range, the when we were firing clays. And he had like an obsession with trying to get good, to the point that even when he was screwing up, he kept repeating, he wanted to go through it again and again and again and again until he got better. And the same thing happened, obviously, with StarCraft. I'm sure he could give me like a breakdown and detailed analysis. The same thing happened with whatever that Factorio, the game that he's obsessed with mastering, despite the fact that it's effectively a massive time sink. And then when you look at the way that he engages in rhetoric and politics, I think to a large degree, Stephen does articulate liberalism as a political philosophy because he genuinely believes it, because it is the best system for him individually. Living in a free society is good for Stephen, and so he's a militant advocate for liberalism. But while still speaking truth, he does engage in rhetorical gamesmanship, not because he's not trying to speak true, but because he's trying to be the most effective debater possible. And so Jordan Peterson, my internet dad, who all of you disrespect, and you're obviously going to piss me off, him seeing almost instantaneously, you were a gamer and a shit talker and a banter person who enjoyed the mastery of mastering a video game. Did you take that skill set, insight, and interest and apply it to the realm of politics? And I think the answer instantaneously from Stephen, even if he denies it, the answer should be yes, absolutely.
No, I won't say so.
Go fuck yourself, Stephen. All right. Let's see what his rationale is.
Oh, I mean, if you get really reductionist, everything in life is kind of a game, but that's not very satisfying. I think I grew up like very argumentative. My mom is from Cuba, so my family was like very conservative. And then I grew up like listening to the news all day, listening to my mom's political opinions all day. And then I argued with kids in high school and everything. And I've always been kind of like an argumentative, type A, aggressive personality. So I think that probably lent itself well to the political stuff in 2016. Yeah.
Okay, but you cannot tell me that the way that he approaches rhetoric is not the same as like mastery. The intention to master a video game. So hold on, my fan isn't working and I'm getting very hot. So excuse me 1 second. I do find that funny that Stephen was like, nah. Oh, cool. My overhead fan is busted. That's very cool. Oh no, it's not on. That's the problem. Cool. I fixed it. I am a genius. Continuing. I don't believe Stephen, and I'm actually going to write this down as something that I want to argue with him on. Gamesmanship. Texas, why are you such an asshole? Children dying is not worse than other people dying. Then let's do... This will be under the Jordan Peterson stuff. As a matter of fact, I'm going to invert this. The Texas thing, I think, is going to be a warm-up. If we hang out on the 27th and if we have time for a podcast, then I'll open up with why are you such a dick in reference to the Texas stuff. Then I'll challenge him on the Jordan Peterson debate edging stuff and women in the workplace and dragon / fire as a predator archetype. And then this will be a good one too. Game mastery applied to politics. If he doesn't see it in himself, that's totally fine. I just like, from an exterior perspective, it makes a lot of intuitive sense to me.
Was that useful in gaming? That personality?
Yes. It was useful in streaming for sure.
In some ways, yeah. In some ways, no. I don't know directly for the games itself. I don't know how much it necessarily mattered. But for all the peripheral stuff, in some ways it was really beneficial. I could kind of like cut out my own path and I could be very unique and I could kind of be on my own. In some ways it was very detrimental. I can be very difficult to get along with. And I'm very much kind of like, I want to do this thing. And if you try to tell me what to do, I don't want to have like a sponsor or a team or anybody kind of with a leash on me. So yeah, I guess it worked out.
It's interesting.
That was going to be one of my questions was, did he do the Texas thing as a way to say, if you're trying to put a leash on what I say and what I do, then you can go fuck yourself? I actually wonder if that's a subconscious motivation for the Texas tweet.
Because the temperamental proclivity that you're describing, that's associated with low agreeableness. And generally, well, and that's more combative, it's more stubborn, it's more implacable, it's more competitive. The downside is that it's more skeptical, it can be more cynical, it can be less cooperative. But generally, a temperament like that is not associated with political belief on the left.
True. I think that's why Stephen is so successful, is because he has a right-wing temperament advocating for left-wing politics.
Because the leftists tend to be characterized by higher levels of compassion, and that's low agreeableness. So, that element of your temperament, at least, is quite masculine. And a lot of
that's why a lot of dudes like Stephen when he's doing banter, is because it's funny as shit and it's disagreeable. Yes.
The ideology that characterizes the modern left has a much more temperamentally feminine nature. So all right. So why do you think the shift from your popularity to political commentary worked? And you said that started about 2016. And why do you think that shift happened for you, like in terms of your interest?
I think I've always been interested in a lot of things. Like, I grew up with a very strong political bend. It was conservative until I got into my streaming years, probably 5 or 6 years into streaming. I slowly kind of started to shift to the left. I would say that, I guess in around 2016, when I saw all of the conversations going on with the election and when all the issues being talked about, I felt like the conversations were very low quality. And in my naivety, I thought that maybe I could come in and boost the quality, at least in like my little corner of the internet, to have better conversations about what was going on. And so that was basically my injection point into all of that, was, fighting about those political issues and then arguing with people about them, doing research and reading and all of that. Yeah.
And so did you do that by video to begin with as well?
Yeah, it was all streaming. Yeah.
It was all streaming. And so I presume you built an audience among the people who were following you as a gamer first, and then that started to expand. Is that correct?
Basically, yeah. Without getting too much into like the business or streaming side of things, basically, actually, this probably carries over to basically to all media, I would imagine, is you've got people that will watch you for special events. So maybe you're like a commentator of the Super Bowl, or maybe you're hosting like a really huge event. Then you've got people who will watch you every time you're participating in your area of expertise. So for me, that's like a particular game I might be playing. It might be when you're on like a particular show or something that people watch you for. And then the fundamental fan, like the best fan that you're converting to the lowest and most loyal viewer, I guess, is somebody that's watching you basically no matter what you're doing. And these are the people that'll follow you from area to area. Right. And I think because of the way I did gaming and I talked about a lot of other stuff, whether it was politics, science, current events, whatever, I had a lot of loyal fans that kind of followed me wherever I went. So quite a few of them stuck in Star Trek.
Established a reputation.
Yeah.
So how would you characterize?
Brilliant. Honestly, like, I should pick Stephen's brain about business analysis. Excuse me. 3 types of fans: big events, special events, and fans of the personality. And what's interesting about this is that we could go back, and I would basically say that the big event for me in politics is probably the Lance and Serfs debate. So if I'm on a big debate with other big characters, I will see an increase in viewership, because they're kind of hoping that it will get as spicy as that debate. And sometimes I deliver and sometimes I don't. You know, sometimes it's a boring panel, sometimes it's a fire panel. Actually, some of my worst debates, in my opinion, are my most popular ones, which is hilarious, because the other person was a fucking idiot. Then when special events, I would say that would be like, people would watch me for debate style content or review style content, or they would watch me for Warhammer, et cetera, et cetera. That's what Stephen's basically saying. And then fans of the personality are people who will follow you through a variety of niches. What is interesting about Stephen is that I think that he has been doing this for so long, and he's been so consistent with putting out content, that I would say the people who will watch him no matter what Like they'll watch him during the League of Legends game days or whatever, where he's actually just playing video games and not saying anything. I would say that's 3,000 to 5,000 people, which is actually very impressive that effectively this dude could fart into the fucking wind and his audience is larger than 99% of people on the internet. But when he's engaged in special events like debates or political research, he does better. And when he's involved in large events like debates against large characters, he does even better. This is just descriptively true and kind of an interesting thing to strategize about from a business perspective.
Is your reach now? How would you quantify it?
I think can you be more precise?
How many people are watching your tip?
And sorry, let me just go ahead and address the food thing real quick. That way I can move on in chat. For the food thing, you're going to have to eat a shitload. But Jonah Zilla, just being real, chicken and rice can be your mainstay for like breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And it's actually very cheap. You can just buy shitloads of chicken breasts and batch cook them on Sundays. That's actually what I do. But if you're trying to hit 6,000 calories and you're trying to gain weight and lift weights, the easiest way to do it is just protein shakes. Just buy a $50 jar of, protein powder and then just drink a protein shake every hour. That's the only way I was able to get the amount of protein that I needed and the amount of calories that I needed.
Typical video that you might produce, and what are you doing for subscribers, say on YouTube, and total? Any idea about total reach?
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess my subscribers on YouTube, I have around, I think that's around 770,000 on my main channel. I think I probably do between.
Which is funny because he's tripled in size since this interview. Did he say 170,000?
I have around, I think that's around 770,000 on my main channel.
Oh, 770,000. Okay. All right.
I think I probably do between all three channels, I think around 15 to 20 million views a month. And then I live stream to anywhere from 5 to 15,000 concurrent viewers a day for hopefully around 8 hours a day. Yeah.
Which, by the way, that's impressive by itself. Around 5 hours, my brain just turns to soup. Okay.
So you have quite a substantial reach. And so you said that initially you were more conservative leaning, but that changed. What did it mean that you were more conservative leaning, and how and why did that change?
When I said I was conservative leaning, I was writing articles for my school newspaper defending George Bush and the Iraq War. I was like very much like I think it's like an insult
based
now when people say like neocon, but I was like very much like a conservative, a Bush era conservative. So supported big business, supported traditional, all of the conservative, I guess, like foreign policy, hawkish foreign policy, for whatever that meant as like a 14, 15-year-old.
Right.
There was the whole Elian Gonzalez incident that was very big for Cuban Americans, where there was a Cuban boy that tried to come to the United States with several other people and his mother, and their raft, I guess, crashed or something happened. I think his mom died and some other people died, and there was a
Elian Gonzalez.
Huge debate on whether or not to send him back to Cuba, and Clinton ended up sending him back to Cuba. And I know that my mom was super irritated and all that, to say the least. And then once I hit college, I think I supported Ron Paul in 2008. So I was a big Ron Paul libertarian guy in high school. When I went to a Catholic Jesuit.
Dude, conservatarianism is just correct, man. Like, I view this as a failure of the right wing. I genuinely do. So the problem with libertarians and anarcho-capitalism is it is unable to protect itself. By constantly trying to diffuse the power of the state, it allows itself to become the victim of those who wield power. And so you have to ask yourself, what are the appropriate rules of government within a society, and then allow a government to fulfill those roles. And so libertarianism's constant political failure, I associate with that. But the truth is that like fiscal conservatism isn't fully correct, because effectively they will spend $1 in order to try to save a dime. So they're kind of fucking stupid, even though their instincts are in the right place. Their execution is terrible. And then social conservatives, I think there's something to be said for like the Jordan Peterson mythological analysis of religion. I'm not a literalist, but I do think that a lot of literalists live good lives because they follow the moral memes of religion. So they're also largely incorrect while still doing things well. And then, of course, I just think Burke is like Burkean conservatism, which is so small that it's practically non-existent. I just think is fundamentally correct. But I do view it as a failure of the right, where there is not kind of like a moderate conservative perspective that failed libertarians can go to. And instead, I think failed libertarians will oftentimes become liberals. I do view this as a failure of the right.
High school, and I kind of became atheist in that process. I started reading Ayn Rand. So I was very, 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 very conservative.
But on the libertarian end, it sounds
I would say so. Yeah. Initially on the
that makes more sense in relationship to your temperament.
Sure, maybe. Yeah. Initially it was like Christian conservative, and then it became like libertarian conservative. Without my life kind of took like a wacky path, and then as I started.
I'm still very intensely interested in this, but I do want to address something in chat. Connor, you do know Destiny said he wasn't at full power here. This was when he was trying to be a pundit in shows and playing nice. He's disavowed these convos. I don't know why you would disavow these. What's wrong with this conversation so far? Like maybe it'll get worse, but I think if he just came in here and was like a total fucking dickhead, nobody would give him the time of day. So we'll see if it gets worse and if there's something worth disavowing. So far, I'm very interested.
Working, I kind of had to drop out of school. I was working, and then I got into streaming. And once I started streaming, I had a son. Basically, around the first year I started streaming. As I started to go through life, and I went from kind of being in this like working poor position to making a lot of money, especially through the lens of my child, I saw how different life was when I had more money versus less. And I guess like the differences between what was available to me and then my child as I made more money while I was really wealthy versus not as wealthy, it kind of started to change the way that I guess.
So you got more attuned to the consequences of inequality?
Basically, I would say, yeah.
And by the way, you guys are still pissing me off. Sapien Green says, I think this debate might have been a turning point for Destiny's desire to talk to Republicans. But this is where you guys are pissing me off. You're like, oh, JBP's a fucking idiot. JBP's a fucking idiot. JBP's a fucking idiot. And we're actually starting this conversation. Number one, he has an insightful question about whether or not Stephen took his sense of gaming and applied it to politics, because that would be an interesting insight. Stephen denies it. I deny his denial. And then even right here, Jordan Peterson, he's not even saying anything. He's making like a psychological analysis of his upbringing. We've already learned that like libertarianism does absolutely meet Stephen's, Stephen's kind of temperament, but Jordan Peterson 100% just accurately summarized what changed Stephen's mind in a very succinct way, which was that once you become aware of how inequality affects the working class versus the middle class or the upper class, if you're an asshole, then you'll say, well, get good, loser. Anybody can be rich. If you're a thoughtful person, then you might say, okay, well, not everybody has the talents that I do. Therefore, we should build a system that doesn't leave the working class in total depravity, material depravity. And that was what Stephen did. And Jordan Peterson astutely observed it. So I don't know why you guys are being such dicks.
Okay. And so how did that lead you to develop more sympathy for left-leaning ideas, particularly?
I guess my core beliefs have never really changed, but I think the way that those become applied kind of change.
Yep.
So much the same way that you might think that everybody deserves a shot to go to school and have an education. That might be like a core belief, where as a libertarian or conservative, I might think that as long as a school is available, everybody's got the opportunity to go and study. But maybe now as like a liberal or progressive or whatever you'd call me, I might say, okay, well, we need to make sure that there is enough, maybe like food in the household or some kind of funding program to make sure the kid can actually go to school and study, basically. So like the core drive is the same, but I think the applied principle ends up changing a bit based on what you
right.
think
So is your concern
true?
Essentially something like the observation that if people are bereft enough of substance, let's say, that it's difficult for them to take advantage of equal opportunities, even if they are presented to them, let's say.
Yeah, essentially, yeah.
And you have some belief, and correct me if I'm wrong, you have some belief that there is room for state intervention at the level of basic provision to make those opportunities more manifest.
Yeah, to varying degrees, yeah.
Okay. So let
And fuck you guys. You're like, this isn't that insightful. I'm going to get pissed. I am pissed. I got to go full screen. Guys, I get it. You're in my chat. You have a 3,000 IQ. You have an immaculate taste in content. Okay. The average person is a fucking idiot. Okay. We just got done watching the Serfs have information be smashed into his fucking forehead repeatedly and it to fucking bounce off of his smooth brain and wash off like water off of a duck's ass. That's most people. So when you say Jordan Peterson observing that gamesmanship could easily apply to politics is not a decent insight, you're kind of a fucking smug asshole. And I'm sure people have accused you of that in the past, or else you wouldn't have said it. Same thing with what's the other insight? That Stephen's applied morality, his principles have stayed relatively similar, but his applied morality is different, and therefore the problems of inequality. Believe it or not, Jordan Peterson actually believes in some level of equality in order to stabilize society. But seeing that is what, or asking, being curious enough to ask about that question is insightful. So the fact that you think everyone is like Stephen or everyone is like you're fucking autistic. Most people are stupid as shit. So get off your fucking high horse, come down to reality, and fucking be normal. Okay? I love you. I love you. More people are like Lance from the Serfs than are like Destiny or even my chat. Before we get back into it, Fashion 40 says base take, Connor, but is life not particular gamesmanship? Yes, but tons of people are bad at gamesmanship, and lots of people don't even analyze the games they are playing.
let's start talking more broadly then on the political side. So how would you characterize the difference, in your opinion, between the left and the conservative political viewpoints?
On a very, very, very broad level, if there's some, I would say if there's some like good world.
Short Stack Goblin asks an important question. Am I trying to replace Dan? No. But I am trying to be good enough friends with Steven that eventually I'm in a room with Dan and we fucking verbally fight.
That we're all aiming for. I think people on the left seem to think that a collection of taxes from a large population that goes into a government that's able to precisely kind of dole out where that tax money goes. You're basically able to take the problems of society. You're able to scrape off, hopefully, not super significant amount of money from people that can afford to give a lot of money, and then through government programs and redistribution, you target those taxes essentially to people that kind of need whatever bare minimum to take advantage of opportunities in society. Yeah.
Okay.
And then on the conservative end, I guess a conservative would generally think that, why would the government take my money? I think from a community point of view, through churches, through community action, through families, we can better allocate our own dollars to our own friends and family to help them and give them the things that they need so that they can better participate in and thrive in society, basically.
Okay, so one of the things that I've always found a mystery, I mean, I think there's an equal mystery on the left and on the right in this regard, is that the more conservative types tend to be very skeptical of big government, and the leftist types tend to be more skeptical of big corporations. Right? Well,
hold on.
History on the left and on the right in this regard is that the more conservative types tend to be very skeptical of big government, and the leftist types tend to be more skeptical of big corporations.
Not always. This is an American phenomena. So when you're talking about skeptical of quote unquote big government, the right wing historically, if you look at it as an analysis of institution, the right wing were the apologists of the monarchy and nobility of Europe during the French Revolution. And so the right wing was not always skeptical of government. And then with the left wing, they were kind of skeptical of government, but realistically, they're skeptical of concentrated power no matter where it manifests. And so I feel like this analysis is effectively like an American historical analysis, whereas it's not true throughout all of history.
Right. Well, so following through the logic that you just laid out, you made the suggestion that one of the things that characterizes people on the left is the belief that government can act as an agent of can and should act as an agent of distribution. Okay, a potential problem for that is the gigantism of the government that does that. Now, the conservatives are skeptical of that gigantism. And likewise, the liberals, the progressives in particular, we'll call them progressives, are skeptical of the reach of gigantic corporations. And I've always seen a commonality in those two, in that both of them are skeptical of gigantism. And so one of the things that I'm concerned about, generally speaking, with regard to the potential for the rise of tyranny is the emergence of giants. And one potential problem with the view that the government can and should act.
LB for $2 says, can we have one episode of Star Talk? Yes. As like a separate stream on a weekend, we could do some sci-fi nerd shit. Sure.
Act as an agent of redistribution is that there is an incentive put in place, two kinds of incentives. Number one, a major league incentive towards gigantism and tyranny. And number two, an incentive for psychopaths who use compassion to justify their grip on power, to take money and to claim that they're doing good. And I see that happening everywhere now in the name of, particularly in the name of compassion. And it's one of the things that's made me very skeptical, in particular about the left, and at least about the progressive edge of the left. So I
100% agree with this. But I mean, I'm skeptical of this in all its many manifest forms. And this is one of my biggest criticisms of Hassan Piker and of Vaush, and to a lesser degree, Destiny, is when you see it like, so what's happened? This actually goes back to the woke right. I need to follow up with Andrew Wilson because we were supposed to have a conversation about it. Where's the woke right? Scrolling. Give me a second. Woke right. So what Jordan Peterson is talking about, and he talked about this with James Lindsay, is that there are Machiavellian, meaning that they don't believe what they truly say. They just manipulate people with words to their own ends. They're psychopathic, meaning that they don't have empathy for people besides themselves. They're narcissistic, which means they're self-obsessed. And they're sadistic, meaning that they enjoy the pain of others. I would say that to greater and lesser degrees, the right wing and the alternative media scene is filled with fucking freaks like this. And the truth is that I think that a lot of powerful institutions are filled with people like this because psychopaths tend to step on other people willingly in order to climb the social hierarchy game. And so, as a result of that, my only problem with Jordan Peterson saying this is you could say that the left is filled with these people, particularly the authoritarian left is filled with people like this, but so is the right. So are some of your best fucking friends and former colleagues, Jordan. Trump is like this. Candace is like this. Tucker is like this. Whatever that Matt Walsh is like this. They're all fucking Machiavellian, psychopathic, narcissistic, sadistic fucking freaks. So the fact that JBP recognizes this, good. The fact that he doesn't recognize this on his own team, infuriating.
Curious about what you think about those two. First of all, it's a paradox to me that the conservatives and the leftists face off each other with regard to their concern about different forms of gigantism and don't seem to notice that the thing that unites them is some antipathy. This is especially true for the libertarians, some antipathy towards gigantic structures per se. And so then I would say, with regards to your antithesis between liberalism and conservatives, the conservatives are pointing to the fact that there are intermediary forms of distribution that can be utilized to solve the social problems that you're describing that don't bring with them the associated problem of gigantism.
Like what? I would actually be very curious about what those solutions are, because people will often cite like charity as like the vehicle through which we could achieve like redistributive economics that would actually solve all of society's problems. Well, there's plenty of fucking wealth. There's plenty of wealth, correlated and concentrated in the upper echelons of society. So why aren't we seeing attempts by the private market to solve social ills? They clearly, and then also in the 19th century, why didn't they do that? In the early 20th century, why didn't they do that? It's pretty clear that human beings are ultimately selfish creatures. And when they're given incredible amounts of wealth and power, you will be lucky if they break off 10% of it in order to help the rest of society out.
Like it's been shocking to me to watch the left, especially in the last 6 years, ally itself, for example, with pharmaceutical companies, which was something I'd never thought I would see in my lifetime. I mean, for decades, the only gigantic corporations the left was more skeptical of than the fossil fuel companies were the pharmaceutical companies.
Oh God! All right, this is where Dad's gonna lose me as well. He's gonna fucking. He's been hanging out with stoner, schizoid, right-wing freaks, and so Dad's gonna lose me. Not my biological dad, my internet dad. I love my biological dad. I love my internet dad, but my internet dad is about to lose me.
That all seemed to vanish overnight around the COVID time. So I know the story. That's a lot of things to throw at you, but it sort of outlines the territory that we could probably investigate productively.
Yeah, so a couple things. I would say that the current political landscape we have, I think, is less. I understand the concept of conservatives supporting corporations and liberals supporting like large government. I think today the divide we're starting to see more and more is more of like a populist, anti-populist rise, or even like an institutional or anti.
True, and I've picked the losing side. Institutionalism. What an asshole.
Institutional rise. So, for instance, I think conservatives today in the United States are largely characterized with, I would say, with populism, in that they're supporting like certain figures, namely right now Donald Trump, who they think alone can kind of like lead them.
Sorry, reading this because it's pertinent. Sacred Snow says, you can ask Destiny to expand more upon why he disavows his playing nice with MAGA phase, but from what I understand, yes, they were happy to have him in the space, but he feels he reinforced their audience's opinion of the pundit by not making them look stupid. If you give too much charity to batshit positions, you normalize them. I understand that. That makes sense.
Against the corrupt institutions, be them corporate or government. I feel like most conservatives today are not as trustful of big corporations as they were back in like the Bush era, where we would, conservatives would champion, big corporations.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah.
That's a strange thing because it makes the modern conservatives a lot more like the 60s leftists.
Potentially, yeah.
I hate the misuse of the term leftist, but let's not get spun up on small details.
I mean, that brings us into the issue, too, of whether the left-right divide is actually a reasonable way of construing the current political landscape at all. And I'm not sure it is, but...
Right. I think left and right is perfectly viable if people actually understand what the term is. People think that left and right just means Democrat, Republican, and that's how they use it. But left used to mean, because it originates from the French Revolution, was the people who were more people, pro-demos, the Jacobins and the moderate reformers and all that kind of stuff. Those were the lefties, the left side of the parliament. And the right wing were the institutionalists. They were the conservatives and the traditionalists who wanted to preserve monarchy and the power of the church and the power of social institutions and nobility. And so as a result, they created like an absolute shitstorm of a society. So between that, there was Burke, who is the father of conservatism, who saw the chaos of the French Revolution. And he said, what conservatism should do is start from a default to social institutions because they've been formed over centuries and millennia and have within them contained wisdom that has evolved over time. But you should needle and criticize progressive ideas. That way you can eliminate the bad ones and integrate the good ones. That is what the father of conservatism said.
And so when I do that, people are like, you're a progressive because you're willing to change things in order to improve society. It's like, fuck you. Sorry for getting spicy, but fuck you. That's what Edmund Burke said, the father of philosophical conservatism. I fucking hate that conservatism in the modern parlance means traditionalism. It makes me want to kill myself with a hammer.
Right now, it kind of is, but only because so many conservatives are following Trump. So, like, your populist, anti-populist thing kind of maps on kind of cleanly to the left and right. It doesn't work with progressives, though, or the far left, because they're also anti-large everything. So, in a surprising way, on very, very far left people, you might find them having a bit more in common.
Hey, Melody, I love you, but you said Connor's an easy guy to impress. Go fuck yourself.
With kind of like a MAGA Trump supporter than like a center-left liberal. So for instance, like both of these groups of people on the very far left will be very dovish on foreign policy, probably a little bit more isolationist. They're not a big fan of like a ton of immigration or a ton of trade with other countries. They might think that there's a lot of institutional capture of both government and corporations. So both all of the MAGA supporters and the far, far left might think.
Crawling Chaos says, I dislike Peterson for his role in MAGA taking over. You can disagree all you like, but that fucking happened. No, I agree with you. Why do you think why do you think I went so hard at Adam Friended? Adam Friended, Sitch, and I view as like 90% like politically aligned. They, weirdly enough, Sitch will go on a fucking rant about social institutions, and he will almost be without, I don't even know if he's ever read Burke. He is channeling the spirit of Edmund Burke. Like, Sitch could be Edmund Burke reincarnated. And I wish he had his political relevance. But Adam did the fucking sweeper cringe centrist heterodox apologia that allowed people to view Trump as the lesser of two evils. And everybody saw it coming from a mile away. And I am disappointed in Jordan Peterson doing that. But I think what happened was, he came out and he said fairly normie, center-right, lib-con shit. The far left attacked him viciously and painted him as a Nazi. So he started hanging out with conservatives, and then he started just being friendly to all conservative, disruptive ideas. And I also think he got rich, so he became disconnected with the working class and the middle class. So, yeah, I view Jordan Peterson as a fallen figure. That doesn't mean that you can't learn from him. And that's why I get frustrated with chat. Vlad Darius Serban, as an example, says, I'm biased. I dislike Peterson. It is not that insightful. Hey, you change from A to B? Yeah, because you prefer A? Yeah, how fucking insightful of him to follow the convo. Vlad, do you have any idea how much content we consume where one of the major problems in the conversation is people being unable to follow or conceptualize the words being said? That's like 80% of internet content. 80% of internet content is actually people disagreeing on what words meaning, and some people being so fucking stupid that they can't even define the words that they're using. That's 80% of Twitch and YouTube political content. Anyways, you hurt my feelings.
That corporations don't have our best interest at heart, and the government is corrupt and captured by lobbyists. You'll see a lot of overlap there.
Right.
I think that sometimes there's a couple things. One is just something I feel like I've discovered. People have no principles. I think that people are largely guided by whatever is kind of satisfying them or making them feel good at the time. I think it's a real.
Let me go ahead and I'm going to extrapolate this out. Sorry. My chat, if you don't like me talking for prolonged periods, you can fuck off. Grassroots says, a lot of people think they are pro gamers, but are actually chewing on the controller. This is true in games and life. Lol. Yes. And what I would say is, I'm an above average FPS player. All right. First person shooter player. But all I do is sight picture and sight alignment in a quick way. So I walk into a room, I line up the gun as quickly as possible, and I kill the target. I also know how to play corners really well, where I can maximize cover and minimize exposure. And I'm also a really good camper. Like, I know you're not supposed to camp because it's cheating, but if there's a way to camp on the map and get a bunch of kills, I can typically identify the place that is going to have the most amount of foot traffic and then I can get into a position that not a lot of people can see, and then I can just start annihilating people until they destroy my campsite. So I think that I'm an above average FPS player. However, there are FPS players who blow me away because not only do they play the odds while moving through through the map, they also optimize weapons, and they optimize movement, and they optimize maps, and they optimize power-ups, and they optimize this, and they optimize that. And in my opinion, they optimize to the point that the game is no longer fun. You know what I'm saying? I liked running around in Call of Duty and playing with an explosive crossbow and a ballistic knife, and I liked having a 0.8 KD ratio on the map because they were killing me with sniper rifles and machine guns, and I was killing them with cross-map explosive crossbow shots and 20-yard ballistic knife shots. You know what I'm saying? They might be beating me in the game, but I am shaming them with the stupid fucking weapons I am using to kill them. And so, like, optimization is beautiful. I love people who have optimized their lives and optimized their games, and I applaud them. You should not optimize your life to the point that it's no longer fun. Sharing a pearl of gamer wisdom with you, bros. Oh, fudge nuggets.
Really important thing to understand because people's beliefs will seem to change at random. If you're trying to imagine that a belief is coming from some underlying principle or is governed by some internal, like moral or reasonable code or whatever, I think generally there are large social groups and people kind of follow them along from thing to thing, which is why you end up in strange worlds sometimes where like the position on vaccines and being an anti-vaxxer might have been seen as something, 10 years ago as kind of like a hippie
I already know where this conversation is going, and I guarantee you the next 30 minutes are going to piss me the fuck off.
leftist, and now
Probably from Jordan, by the way.
Maybe it's more like a conservative, or it's associated more with like MAGA Trump supporters or whatever. I think as a result of how the social
Michael M., I parasocially love you.
groups move around. When it comes to you mentioned this like gigantism thing. That's another thing where I'm not sure if people actually care about gigantism or if they're using it as a proxy for other things that they don't like. Like,
true.
I could totally imagine.
Well, I care about it.
Sure. Yeah, you might. Yeah, sorry. It just saying
okay.
in general.
That's
yeah.
Okay.
Because like I could imagine somebody saying that like they don't trust like a large government, they think there's too much, prone to tyranny or something like that, but also be supportive of an institution like the Catholic Church, which is literally, one guy who is a direct line to
but they
God.
can't tax.
Well, I mean,
and they don't have a military.
That
and
is,
they can't conscript.
All right, this sounds like it's actually going to be like a larger contention. So let me go ahead and play this.
Somebody saying that like they don't trust like a large government, they think there's too much, prone to tyranny or something like that, but also be supportive of an institution like the Catholic Church, which is literally, one guy who is a direct line to God.
But they can't tax.
I'm going to agree with Jordan here. However, I know Steven's counter argument, and I think it's going to be valid. So let's just listen for a moment.
Well, I mean,
and they don't have a military.
That
they got the Swiss Guard, lol.
And they can't conscript you.
True, yeah.
And they can't.
But they do have the power of heaven and hell.
Can't throw you in jail.
That is true, yeah. I mean,
well, those are major and significant. I mean, I get the overlap. Don't get me wrong.
Sure, but I'm saying like, even if you had a local government, like if you had a state government or a tribe, usually they've got some form of enacting punishment. It'll be sometimes more brutal, but they can throw you in jail. Conscription hasn't existed in the U.S. since the Vietnam War.
Yet.
I mean, yeah, true. Yeah.
Yeah, true.
So
why is Dad getting so fucking pissed off? Is it because so I'm gonna make an observation real quick. It sounds like Jordan, I'm gonna be critical here. Sorry, internet dad. It seems like he's so used to people being in awe of his insight, and he started the conversation with a certain level of charity and like inquisitive nature to Steven. And now that Steven is not being charitable back and is not being inquisitive back, he's talking to Jordan as if Jordan is a child, who doesn't understand complex topics. I could look at this sneer. I could be reading too much into it, but look at this.
Right.
Look at it.
I I think that sometimes there's a couple things. One, this is something I feel like I've discovered. People have no principles. Good at random. If you're trying to search social groups and people kind of follow them along from thing to thing.
Sorry, did I fast forward instead of rewind? What did I do?
Good at the time. I think it's a really important thing to understand because people's beliefs will seem to change at random. If you're trying to,
Did I rewind?
Twitter might have been seen as something, 10 years ago as kind of like a hippie leftist, and now I think as a result of how the social groups move around.
Anyways, I'm just going to summarize it because I think I misclicked and I think I might have fast forwarded a couple of minutes and I don't necessarily want to be clicking around for it. I want to get through the content. Effectively, I feel like if you rewind even 30 seconds, 2 minutes in the VOD, you will actually see Stephen kind of being dismissive and not acknowledging what Jordan said, where there obviously the Catholic Church has a lot of power, a lot of influence, et cetera, but there are very clear privileges of being a government that are more threatening to human liberty than the Catholic Church is capable of. And so Stephen kind of like, he acknowledges it, but then he just moves it off briefly without changing any of his thought pattern or criticism. And I think Jordan Peterson is borderline offended that he didn't take more time to consider what was being said. So if we bump into it again, I'll point out the exact grimace that Jordan Peterson makes.
When it comes to you mentioned this like gigantism thing.
Oh, shit.
That's another thing where I'm not
here.
sure if people actually care about gigantism or if they're using it as a proxy for other things that they don't like. Like I could totally imagine.
Well, I care about it.
Sure. Yeah, you might. Yeah, sorry. It just
That's
meant
okay.
in general.
That's
Yeah.
okay.
Because like I could imagine somebody saying that like they don't trust like a large government, they think there's too much prone to tyranny or something like that, but also be supportive of an institution like the Catholic Church, which is literally one guy who has a direct line to
But they
God.
can't tax.
Well, I mean,
And they don't have a military.
Watch this. Watch for the sneer.
That
and
is
they can't conscript you.
true.
Right?
Yeah,
And they can't throw you in jail.
that is true. Yeah, I mean,
Right. Well, those are major and significant. I mean, I get the overlap. Don't get me wrong.
So Jordan's being conciliatory here, where he's saying like, okay, I understand that there's an overlap for gigantism. However, these are the privileges where people are specifically caring about the government. Now watch this.
Sure. But I'm saying like, even if you had a local government, like if you had a state government or a tribe, usually they've got some form of enacting punishment. It'll be sometimes more brutal, but they can throw you in jail. Conscription hasn't existed in the US since the Vietnam War.
Yet.
I mean,
And
yeah, true. Yeah.
Yeah, true.
so look at this like look down thing. So it seems like Jordan is actually concerned about something. And he's offended by the flippant nature with which Stephen dismisses it.
So yeah, I think that I guess when I look at
let's go back. Let's go back to the redistribution issue.
Mhm.
I mean,
Real quick. True Zealous says, Connor, off topic, but if a creator boxing event reached out to you to participate, do you and you get to choose your opponent, would you do it and who would you pick? So number one, the answer is yes. I do have neck issues, so I would need to get like a clean bill of health from the doctor, and I would also just have to accept the fact that a weird punch could leave me paralyzed and or dead. But it could be really fun. I think that I should do steroids and fight Sam Hyde. I don't think I have the balls to do that. I would fight Hassan Piker, and considering I hate him, I think that would have to be my choice. I would love to fight Mike from PA or Adam Friended or Admiral Gibbs or who's another person that annoys me? Aircraft Sparky or Pisco, and I love Pisco, but I'm just saying I would fight him, or anybody who annoys me. I would fight them. I would fight all of them, especially if they're shorter than me. I really wouldn't give a shit. Like, yeah, I really wouldn't care because I can do cardio. I can get my cardio back up. I can get my weightlifting back up. I can get my, martial arts back up. So if I had a boxing trainer in 6 months, I would fight almost everybody. I would expect to lose to Andrew Tate and Sam Hyde. I think I could beat most other people. So, or I could get my ass kicked in a really entertaining way. Oh, I would 100% fight Queeman as well. But he's short, so it feels unfair. I would train Steven to fight Queeman?
We pay 65% of our income at, say, upper middle class to upper middle class level in.
Oh, this is going to piss me off. Oh, Canada. Okay.
At, say, upper middle class to upper middle class level in Canada. It isn't obvious to me at all that that money is well used. In fact, quite the contrary. In my country now, our citizens make 60% of, they produce 60% of what you produce in the US. That's plummeted over the last 20 years as state intervention has increased. I'm not convinced that the claim that the interests of people.
I think Canada is further socialized. I don't think Canada is a socialist country, but it is further socialized than the United States is, and therefore they have an inverse problem from the United States. The United States probably needs not a little bit more social spending. It needs to deploy the taxation that it currently has in better ways. Whereas I think that Canada could probably cut back a little bit and deploy the cash better.
Who lack opportunity are best served by state intervention. And there's a couple of reasons for that. I mean, first of all, I'm aware of the relationship between inequality and social problem. There's a very well-developed literature on that, and it essentially shows that the more arbitrary, the broader the reach of inequality in a political institution of any given size, the more social unrest. So where all people are poor, there isn't much social unrest, and where all people are rich, there isn't much social unrest. But when there's a big gap between the two, there's plenty, and that's mostly driven by disaffected young men.
I'm going to stare into the camera. So the right-wing prescriptions from MAGA are going to help with that, or are they going to make it even fucking worse? My argument is that MAGA policy is going to make these problems of young men being disaffected with society and jealous / don't feel like they have opportunity is going to get much worse in the next 5 to 10 years.
Who aren't very happy that they can't climb. There are barriers in their way. And so there is reason to ameliorate relative poverty. The problem with that, to some degree, is that most attempts to ameliorate relative poverty tend to increase absolute poverty, and they do it dramatically. And the only solution that we've ever been able to develop to that is something approximating a free market system. I wouldn't call it a capitalist system because I think that's capture of the terminology by the radical leftists. It's a free exchange system, and the price you pay for a free exchange system is you still have inequality, but the advantage you gain is that the absolute levels of privation plummet. And I think the data on that I think they're absolutely conclusive, especially, and that's been especially demonstrated in the radical decrease in rates of poverty since the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1989, because we'd lifted more people out of poverty in the last 4 decades than we had in the entire course of human history up to that date. And that's,
as a neoliberal, I don't think that Stephen is going to object to any of this.
Not least because the statist interventionist types who argued for a radical state-sponsored redistribution lost the Cold War, right? And that freed up Africa to some degree, and certainly the Southeast Asian countries, to pursue something like a free trade economy. And that instantly made them rich, even China. So that's an argument, let's say, on the side of free exchange, but it's also an argument, a twofold argument, pointing out how we ameliorate absolute poverty, which should be a concern for leftists, but doesn't seem to be anymore, by the way, and also an argument for the maintenance of a necessary inequality. Like, I'm not sure that inequality can be decreased beyond a certain degree without that decrease causing other serious problems.
I agree with everything that Jordan has just said. LB says, who on the left is like Tucker or Candace? I'm curious what conservatives think is an equivalent. Yes, True Zealot, Vosh, Hassan. Yup. Now, I think Vosh probably believes his own bullshit, but is too lazy to execute. And I think Hassan probably 70-80% believes his own bullshit, but I think they're delusional enough in order to believe that they're like, their weaponized empathy and compassion is actually just empathy and compassion. So, yeah, Vosh and Hassan 100% all day. if they were actually interested in instituting a decommodification of basic human needs and workers owning the means of production, they actually have sufficient wealth that they could create a cooperative economic venture that like instantiates, you know, socialism as a communal model. But then they always defer to the state, defer to the state, defer to the state. We need the government to do this. We need the government to do this. We need the government to do this. And Vosh does that as a like anarcho-communist / libertarian socialist. Yeah.
We can talk about that, but it's a complicated problem.
Yeah. For one point of clarification, when you say leftist, what do you mean by that?
This is happening, says the left allied itself with Big Pharma. Ha 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 ha. He's talking about like COVID vaccines. So I get it. You can laugh, but that's what he's talking about. Taggeroon for $5. Thank you, King. Says, great point. JP talks about the toxic feminine empathy of the left, but rarely, if ever, calls out the performative, counterproductive cruelty of MAGA. Yup.
Well, I was going with your definition, like essentially the core idea being something like the central problem being one of relative inequality and distribution of resources, and the central solution to that being something like state-sponsored economic intervention. I mean, there's other ways we could define left and right, and we can do that, but, I'll stick with the one that you brought forward to begin with.
Gotcha. Okay. I only want to be clear on that because people get mad if I call myself a leftist. Oftentimes online or especially in Europe or worldwide, leftists will refer exclusively to like socialists or communists, and anybody to the right of that would be considered like a liberal. If you
no, usually a fascist.
Well, depending on
very rapid.
This is going to be important, so I need to pay attention.
Sometimes online or especially in Europe or worldwide, leftists will refer exclusively to like socialists or communists, and anybody to the right of that would be considered like a liberal. If you
no, usually a fascist.
Well,
that's funny.
Depending on
very rapidly.
Yeah. I just wanted to be clear on that. So I'm absolutely a pro-capitalist, pro-free market guy. I'm never gonna.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's good. It's good to get that clear. Why?
Yeah.
Good.
Because I would argue that when you look at like the fall of the Soviet Union, or you look at the failure of like socialist or communist regimes, I don't know if the issue there was so much redistribution. I think the problem
that was one of many issues.
I don't think it was an issue at all. Actually, I would say I think the issue was.
Come on.
I would argue that when you look at like the fall of the Soviet Union, or you look at the failure of like socialist or communist regimes, I don't know if the issue there was so much redistribution. I think the problem.
Yeah, we're going to need to dig into that.
That was one of many issues.
I don't think it was an issue at all, actually, I would say. I think the issue was command economies.
Wait a minute. What
Mm-hmm.
do you mean redistribution wasn't an issue? What the hell do you think they did to the kulaks? That was forced redistribution. It resulted in the
or the Great Leap Forward, or the subsequent starvation, or the centrally planned economies, or their military-industrial complex, or the lack of private industry leading to stagnation within the private economy, or the fact that when they weren't stagnating, they were actually privatizing large portions of the economy. Yeah, Stephen lost me as well.
Death of 6 million people. So maybe I'm not understanding what you mean, but that was redistribution at its like pinnacle.
Sure.
And forced redistribution. And it was brutal.
When I think of the strengths of capitalism, the ability for markets to dynamically respond to shifting consumer demand is like the reason why capitalism and free market economies dominate the world. When you've got socialist or communist systems, command economies, where a government is trying to say, this is how much this is going to cost, this is how much you're going to produce and make. This is a failed way of managing a state economy. Even in places where they still do it, there are always shadow economies and stuff that were in the Soviet Union that prop up, where people try to basically ameliorate the conditions that are resulting from said horrible command economy practices. So I guess in a way you could argue a command economy is kind of like redistribution. It's a form of it, but...
I mean, that's definitionally kind of what we're talking about.
It's a worse problem. If you're pointing to the fact that that's a worse problem, I'm with you
I would say that's
100%.
definitely the reason.
That's very conciliatory.
Why these places failed, because they just weren't able to respond to changing conditions.
Okay, so what's the difference between us?
Going online without ExpressVPN is like leaving your kids with the nearest stranger.
Okay, so what's the difference between a state that attempts to redistribute to foster equality of opportunity and a command economy? Is it a difference of degree? Like, are you looking at models, let's say like the Scandinavian countries? Or I wouldn't use Canada, by the way, because Canada is now, what would you call, predicted by economic analysts to have the worst performing economy for the next 4 decades of all the developed world. So maybe we'll just leave the example of Canada off the table.
Sure.
That's funny. So let me show you. He's asking, what should a redistributive government do? So I think that there's a psychological concept called Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And I think that people typically get up and work every single day because they need to fulfill their physiological needs. They need food, they need water, and they need shelter. And that's one of the prime motivators for why they get up every day. So I think these things should be, how do I say this? Easy to access by being socially and economically productive for 40 hours per week. People should be able to access water almost no matter what. They should be able to access nutritious drinks very cheaply. They should be able to access nutritious food very cheaply. They should be able to access decent housing very cheaply. And so it's the government's role, in my opinion, not to provide these services and guarantee these services, because I think this is the reason why most people wake up and move in the morning. However, I do think it's the state's job to make such an abundant economy through subsidization and incentive structures that food, water, and shelter is easy to obtain as long as you're economically and socially productive for 40 hours a week. Then when it comes to security, I think that this is the primary role of the state that almost everybody agrees to, is providing the physical security for its citizens. When it comes to social and ego, these things are infinitely more difficult to control. And so I think that effectively it's the state's job to provide early childhood education and public education until citizens are adults, to guarantee that they will be, or as close to guarantee as possible, that there will be socially well-adapted human beings who make up its citizens and constituency. Okay? So I view education as necessary to do this. But as soon as you have physical security, everybody can meet their physiological needs with a reasonable amount of effort. You have physical security as close to guaranteed as possible. You have a social system that enables citizens to become well-adapted social and economic beings who are capable of pursuing self-actualization. That's the role of the state. It's to enable, not to control. End of Connor's political theory.
Scandinavian countries are often the polities that are pointed to by, I would say, by people who, at least in part, are putting forward a view of redistribution for purposes of equality of opportunity like you are. But they're a strange analogy because they're very small countries. And up till now, they were very ethnically homogenous. Exactly. And that makes...
Well, Azrai says, Valor, how does a Burkean conservative actually get rid of institutions they view as no longer needed? They become vestigial, like the monarchy. We obviously eliminated the monarchy in the United States through force of arms, but they're effectively vestigial in Europe. They're so desiccated and small that nobody even gives a shit about them anymore. Drakara, except for ceremonies. Drakara says, Connor, gonna pick up my first combat patrol. I'm stuck between Dark Angels and Death Guard. This is strictly for aesthetics. I know little of gameplay, but want to set up myself for future success. I do not have advice. Follow the rule of cool. Whatever you think is coolest, that is what you should get. Although, if you get Chaos, you're giving Imperial players like more bad guys to shoot at, and that is a desperate problem within the hobby, is everybody collects Imperial, so it's Imperial versus Imperial battles all the time, whereas realistically, we need more people to play enemy factions.
A big difference when you're trying to flatten out the redistribution. Plus, they are also incredibly wealthy, which makes, redistribution, let's say, a lot easier. So So why doesn't a government that's bent on redistribution fall prey to the pitfalls of command economy and forced redistribution, for that matter? How do you protect against that?
I think what you have to do is very, very, very difficult. Is people get very ideologically captured by both ends, and they feel very, I guess, like committed, or they feel very allegiant to pushing certain forms of economic organization. And I think sometimes it blinds them to some of the benefits of what exists when you incorporate kind of multiple models, or I mean, you'd call them mixed economies, which is really what every capitalist economy today is. It's some form of free market capitalism combined with some form of like government intervention to control for negative externalities. These are the ways that all economies, even in Scandinavia and the world, work. And I think that recognizing the benefits of both systems are the best way to make things work. Yeah.
Fair enough. And the Scandinavian countries seem to have done a pretty good job of that. But like I said, they have a simpler problem to solve, let's say, than the Americans have. Negative externalities. That's an interesting rabbit hole to wander down. The problem I have with negative externalities, you made a case already that, and again, correct me if I've got this wrong, but I think that I understood what you said. A free market, free exchange economy is a gigantic distributed computational device.
Basically, yeah.
Right, exactly.
Which, funnily enough, one of the big problems for command economies is called the computation problem, because no central body can actually compute, the ins and outs of.
Right, exactly. Right. That's a fatal problem, right? Because it doesn't have the computational power. It certainly doesn't have the speed of data recognition. It doesn't have the on-the-ground agents if all of the perception and decision-making is centralized, right? It's way too low resolution. It's going to crash. Okay, and I think that's comprehensible technically as well as ideologically.
Based.
All right, but having said that, with regards to externalities, all the externalities...
Uh-oh, you might lose me.
...that a market economy can't compute are so complex that they can't.
LB says, okay, not the lolly porn guy, but I think Hassan is more right than wrong. LB, that sentence alone makes me want to smash my skull in with a hammer. That is a crazy sentence to type in my chat.
Be determined centrally by the same argument. And
there are ways to account for them, though.
Really?
That work with.
Tell me.
Yeah.
How. Because I can't see that, because I can't see how that they can be accounted for without the same computational problem immediately arising.
Yeah, and I understand that. And I think that's a problem sometimes of people very far on the left when they want to deal with certain problems. I think that they want to bring like heavy-handed, like things like price controls in to say, well, we need less of this, so let's just make this cost this particular thing, which ironically enough introduces a whole other set of externalities that will happen when you get a lot of friction between where your price floor or ceiling is set compared to what a market was set at. But ideally, if you're a reasonable person and you view economies as mixed economies, what you try to do is you try to take these externalities, meaning things that aren't accounted for with your primary system. So in a capitalist system, an externality might be something that causes a negative effect, but it doesn't cost you any money. Pollution would be a good example of that. And rather than saying like, well, no company can pollute this much, or, if you're a company, you have to use these things because the other things are making too much pollution, all you do is you say, okay, well, if we've determined that, say, carbon is bad for the atmosphere, well, we're just going to attach a little price to that. Okay, government is going to say that, yeah, if you pollute this much, here's the price. And then if you want to pay for it, you can. But that type of intervention in the economy basically allows the free market to hopefully do its job, because the government has tacked on a little bit of a price something that tries to account for the cost of that externality. Yeah.
Great. That's a great example. We can go right down that rabbit hole.
Uh-oh.
Carbon. Okay. So first of all, one of the things I've seen, you tell me what you think about this, something that I've seen that actually shocks me, that I was interested in watching over the last 5 or 6 years. I wondered what would happen when the left, the progressives, ran into a conundrum. And the conundrum is quite straightforward. If you pursue carbon pricing and you make energy more expensive, then you hurt the poor. And I don't think you just hurt them. In fact, I know you just don't hurt them. I heard a man 2 days ago who's fed 350 million people in the course of his life, heading the UN's largest relief agency, make the claim quite straightforwardly that misappropriation on the part of interventionist governments increased the rate of absolute privation dramatically in the world over the last 4 or 5 years. And that has happened not least because of carbon pricing, not just carbon pricing, but
This is going to drive me fucking crazy. Where somebody tag Gen X, see if she's in here.
Insistence that carbon per se is an externality that we should control. Now, Germany's paid a radical price for that, for example. So their power is now about 5 times as expensive as it could be. And they
Okay. I mean, we agree with nuclear for subsidization. We agree with quick turn natural gas as a way to utilize carbon emissions to a minimum. Now what?
pollute more per unit of power than they did 10 years ago before they introduced these policies that were hypothetically there to account for externality. And the externality was carbon dioxide. I don't think that's a computable externality. And I don't think there's any evidence whatsoever that it's actually an externality that we should be warping the economic system to ameliorate if
He's getting annoyed because Destiny's taking notes and he keeps looking down. As a sorry, look at this. All right, I might be reading into this. I might be tired, so I'm projecting this shit in. But dude, look at Jordan Peterson's eyeballs, man. He's looking at Destiny, and then he's looking at him writing, and his face keeps getting like more animated and more disgusted as he looks at Destiny's face and looks at Destiny's writing and looks at Destiny's face and looks at him writing. Watch this. Watch this. It's quite funny.
power than they did 10 years ago before they introduced these policies that were hypothetically there to account for externality. And the externality was carbon dioxide. I don't think that's a computable externality. And I don't think there's any evidence whatsoever that it's actually an externality that we should be warping the economic system to ameliorate if the cost of that, and it will be an increase in absolute privation among the world's poor. So, and here's
Okay. So hold on real quick. So Gen X, hi Gen X. Let me scroll up and see how far behind I am. Okay, so Cameron Mosley says lol Sitch's law. Okay, I forget what Sitch's law is. Somebody needs to remind me. So Cameron Mosley, please remind me. Is it every time you talk about politics, somebody will eventually bring up that they hate fucking Adam Friended? Is that Sitch's law? So Gen X says, lol, well, if carbon dioxide is an externality we should ignore, weird, it's the only thing both sides agree on, at least somewhat. So Gen X, I kind of want to ask you, I'm gonna pull this up. So for carbon capture, how much does carbon capture cost per ton? And it's $15 to $120. So let's go for $120 per CO2 captured. Okay. And so how much does a gallon of gas emit of CO2? Is 8.9 kilograms. Wait, a burning 1 gallon of gas, approximately 8.89 kilograms or 20 pounds of carbon dioxide. Wait, that doesn't sound right. 19.6 pounds? Okay. I mean, I guess it says that's correct. So anyways, so let's just say it's 20 pounds. That sounds high to me, but that's okay. A gallon of gas does equal 20 pounds of CO2. Okay. All right, cool. So 20 pounds of CO2. And then how much does a pound go into a ton? Pound into ton is 0.005 US tons. Okay. So how are we going to do this? It costs $120 in order to capture a ton. I'm trying to do the math on this. Oh, okay. So we could do that. We could do this. So basically, because we're doing 20 pounds. So 20 pounds is 0.0005 multiplied by 20 is 0.01. Okay. Does that make sense? Did I do that right? 0.0005 times 20. Guys, you're going to have to deal with the math because trust me, the math is actually going somewhere. So 20 pounds is 0.01 of a ton. Okay. So if it costs $120 to capture a ton of CO2, then it's $1.20, I guess, to capture a metric ton of CO2. Why can't we just add that to gas? Why can't we just add that to gas? Because right now we're paying $2 or $3 per gallon, right? So it would be like a 25% tax. But gasoline is an incredible resource. Like being able to drive 300 miles on a tank of gas is amazing. So why can't we charge an extra dollar per gallon in order to subsidize CO2 capture? Gen X, please answer that question for me. Wow Man says Sitch's law equals math calculations on stream will always derail any and all stream content. Oh, go fuck yourself. It didn't take me that long.
Here's an additional argument on that front with regards to externalities.
But Gen X, if you are listening to me, tell